Good evening. We hope to start the Planning Commission meeting soon. This meeting cannot start until we have quorum and 4 members. We are expecting 4 members here at the beginning of the meeting. We hope Woodward traffic isn't delaying anyone too soon, but we hope to get started very soon.
So real quick, we can get started, but Mark is downstairs printing out hard copies of the minutes for you guys. So we can just handle that part when he gets back.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for coming to the Pontiac Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, September 4th. And I will introduce the people who are here in the room as well as some who are not. To my far left is Corey Christensen, our senior planner. Mark Yandrick is going to be coming up with some papers in his hands very shortly. He is the planning manager. To my left on the dais is Commissioner Michael McGinnis. Tim Shepard here on my immediate left. To my immediate right is Sue Sinclair, and then the seat next to her is going to be for our Vice Chair Sam Henley when he gets here, which should be in about an hour-ish. And then on the far end is our attorney, Morgan McAtammy. And I am Mona Parlev. I'm the chair of the Planning Commission. So would you like to do our roll call?
Commissioner Sinclair.
Present.
Commissioner Shepard.
Present.
Commissioner McGinnis.
Present.
Commissioner Parlev.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Any official communications?
I have none.
All right. Any amendments to our agenda?
I have none.
Okay, very good. We have minutes for review from our August 7th meeting, which are on their way up.
Do we need to approve the agenda? Does the planning commission usually?
All
I
right,
motion to approve the agenda.
great. All in favor? Aye. Any nays? All right,
And who wanted to second that?
I'll support.
look how efficient we are. Look how efficient we are.
Redo it in a few minutes, I guess.
He's our trained professional. Okay, so we will, does anybody have a little song they want to sing?
Madam Chair, I move to suspend the rules that we tackle the minutes at a later point. So we're just setting them aside.
Okay,
If there's a second,
Support.
very good. All in favor?
yes.
Aye, yes. Any opposition? Doesn't look like it. Very good. All right, we're going to move to our first public hearing. It's application ZMA 24-004, Charles Corkum Paddock Vehicle Storage. It's the request to rezone from R1 to M1 at 339 South Paddock.
Thank you. So tonight's first public hearing, if this will work. All right, our first public hearing today is a rezoning request. It's at parcel ID 143179002. And to provide some clarity up front, this actual parcel does not have an address assigned to it. So the address used in most of our paperwork was the adjacent property of 339 South Paddock. The request is to rezone from R1, one-family residential, to M1, light manufacturing. This is where we are in the process. It's a four-step process. You had your informational session 2 months ago, more like a month and a half. After tonight's public hearing, the commission will either make a recommendation to approve or recommendation to deny. It from there goes to city council for 2 readings. And before I jump in, I just wanted to emphasize that the applicant did provide a very detailed history of the property, and that was included in your packet. So here we have the zoning map showing you the parcel in question. It's this parcel right here. It sits directly adjacent to a parcel right here that is zoned M1. It's also part of kind of this contiguous industrial district, but it also sits within a much larger residential neighborhood where the residential character of the area is the primary use. This gives you an idea of what it looks like just using an aerial. You can see it's a very large lot, not necessarily suitable for single-family development. However, it's encircled on most sides by typical R1 lots. But the lot in question itself is much larger, more consistent with the M1 zoning adjacent. And you can see actually the applicant's other facility right here. They're just interested in expanding across into the new parcel. Here are some photos. I'll run through a few, just looking at how it looks currently. These photos were taken in July. This is looking south from Osmond Street. You can see it's somewhat wooded, but mostly just open space. This is what you see from the intersection and looking west from South Jessie. So this parcel, like many parcels in the area, is zoned R1, one family dwelling. The parcel is undeveloped and there are no city records of any previous use. Aerial photography suggests the parcel was used for some type of industrial activity as recently as 1980. Imagery from the 80s and 60s show a large structure with dozens of trucks parked on site. The applicant's history goes into further depth about how the property was actually developed. The applicant intends to expand their current vehicle storage operation, which can be seen on the adjacent parcel to the west, by constructing a 10,000 square foot building on the subject parcel. The subject parcel is significantly larger than the other R1 parcels in the area and has frontage along a historic railroad right-of-way. The railroad has been removed, however, the right-of-way remains. The adjacent parcel is currently utilized for vehicle storage, and approval of this rezoning will allow the applicant to continue their existing operation. The introduction of M1 zoning does allow for several new higher intensity uses to the site that weren't already permitted in the R1 district. However, the applicant has provided the following condition of approval after the staff report was published. The property shall not be utilized for any purpose other than indoor vehicle storage. So essentially, this condition limits the use of the site to a single use. The M1 zoning district is intended to provide suitable locations for small to moderate sized industrial sites. You can see, I'm not going to read through the entire list since the applicant has provided that condition, so these are not threats to the neighborhood. But typically the M1 district is for light industrial activity with some higher intensity allowed by special exception, such as heliports, general manufacturing, major outdoor storage, toxic material storage, and recycling centers. The R1 zoning district, which is what it is currently zoned, is intended to encourage a suitable environment for families, typically with children. It allows one-family dwellings, state-licensed residential facilities, community centers, parks and recreation, community gardens, and small wind energy systems. By special exception, it allows bed and breakfasts, cemeteries, cultural or municipal uses, religious institutions, schools, small outdoor recreation facilities, and wireless telecommunication facilities. These are the 10 standards of approval. You've seen these many times before, so I just put this slide up for your reference, so I'm not going to read through all of them. However, our analysis, we feel that the future land use map classifies this parcel as entrepreneurial, residential, commercial, and green, which is a pretty broad category. Due to contamination from runoff, local business activity is the only feasible use of the site that meets the future land use plan, since residential would not be an acceptable use of the site. The property does not have any natural features that require protection. The current zoning designation would only permit a single-family home by right and some community uses by special exception. Considering the contamination found on the adjacent parcel, it is unlikely the subject parcel is suitable for residential development. The M1 zoning classification contains many uses that may present a risk to the adjacent single-family home neighborhood. However, the applicant has provided a condition of approval that addresses this concern. The city engineer has reviewed the requested rezoning and has not identified any issues. The city engineer has reviewed the requested rezoning and has not identified any issues in terms of utility service. The city engineer has verified that both Osmond Street and South Jessie Street are not suitable for truck traffic. The proposed rezoning is appropriate in terms of parcel size, and a structure can be built on site in compliance with the required setbacks for the M1 properties. So that basically means if the rezoning is approved, it will be able to be built and meet all the requirements for setbacks, everything in the industrial district. The proposed use of the site for indoor vehicle storage could be accommodated with the C3 corridor commercial district, which represents a lesser intensity than the M1 light manufacturing district. While the parcel directly to the west is zoned M1, every other parcel in the immediate area is zoned R1, one family dwelling. This is a residential area with a residential character. The applicant has offered a condition guaranteeing the site will only be used for vehicle storage. And with that, staff's recommendation is denial based on noncompliance with standards F and H, and I'll go back to read those. The capability of the street system to safely and efficiently accommodate the expected traffic generated by uses permitted in the requested zoning district. That is based on feedback from the city engineer. And then 9, rezoning the land is considered to be more appropriate than amending the list of permitted or special land uses. Sorry, no, actually 8, the requested zoning district is considered to be more appropriate. We find that the C3 district would allow the use and it would be a lesser change. So for those reasons, we're recommending denial based on noncompliance with F and H. The applicant, I want to emphasize again, has offered a condition of approval limiting uses of the site to indoor vehicle storage. And then with that, we have standard motions.
Thank you, Corey. And just to recap a conditional rezoning, that is a volunteered condition by the applicant, and it is valid for 2 years, meaning that the use would have to be established and construction would have to be started within 2 years. Otherwise, it reverts back to the previous zoning classification. So anyways, thank you.
Thank you very much. So to be a little clearer here, you're recommending denial even though the applicant provided a condition. So when we get to the point of making a decision, it would be made based on that condition that was provided.
So when you're making your decision, you are to look at these 10 standards.
Right.
If they meet all of them, you recommend approval.
Right.
If they don't, you recommend denial.
Right.
In staff's opinion, it does not meet 2 of them based
Right.
on the fact that the street network, according to the city engineer, is not appropriate for truck traffic, and also because the zoning district could be a lesser district and still allow the intended use.
So then the applicant would come back with a different proposal because they've got the condition?
Well, if you make a recommendation to deny, it goes to city council.
Okay,
Does that help?
yes. Michael, go ahead.
But I think to your question, whether we recommend approval or recommend denial, we are acting on what has now been offered, the conditional rezoning request. They are asking for it to be rezoned, conditional that it can only be indoor vehicle storage.
Right, I
So we
gotcha.
are either going to recommend yes to the city council or recommend no, but that it's still conditional.
Right, okay. All right, do you have any questions for staff, by the way, Michael?
Oh, my turn?
Yes.
So when because this property owner owns the Paddock vehicle storage, I don't want to get the name wrong, but located at the adjacent parcel, that is zoned M1. Did that require 10 or so years ago the rezoning from R1 to M1, where it was sort of like a non-complete? Because I recall it being a very rundown old party store that was vacant, open to trespass, not pleasant for the neighborhood. What was the zoning for that parcel?
So I believe prior to this, it was zoned R1 and then rezoned to M1. I wasn't here at the time, so I can't state why they went all the way to M1 when they could have gone to C3.
Okay.
But yeah, that's the history of the property.
It's not a corridor of any sort.
Right.
But there's no current C3 zoning in the vicinity of any of these parcels, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And I think I saw it, but in terms of number of acres, we're talking about 1.83 acres. Does a railroad right-of-way have a certain zoning designation, or is it kind of like this weird purgatory that slices through our city when it comes to how it's recognized for zoning purposes?
Corey, can you bring up the zoning map? So if it's right away, there's no zoning on that, but I believe that much of the former railroad right away has been vacated, and it is currently R1.
Okay, so there can be, if the right-of-way is vacated, then it's open to be zoned.
Correct.
At the future.
Correct.
Okay, that's helpful. I think that does it in terms of staffing clarification. I'll just say when we get to the public hearing element, I would love to hear if there are neighbors nearby, what their experience has been with Paddock vehicle storage at the intersection of, basically the adjacent parcel. Because what would the practical impact of this rezoning, conditional rezoning, and I want to salute the applicant for adding that condition because that removes a lot of my concern about wanting to make sure that the neighborhood and the residents are protected. But I want to know from the residents' perspective how it's been with the vehicle storage because I don't live across the street, but I did pass there last night. I mean, I just don't see a high volume. And to the one element added about the streets, yeah, Osmond and Jesse should not be seeing heavy trucks on a frequent basis. I concur. I'm just not seeing that with the vehicle storage. That's not been my observation, but I want to hear from those residents that live nearby, because that seems to be a major sticking point about the concern of volume of trucks or heavy vehicles. And I welcome, when it's time for the applicant to share, what from their perspective, the frequency. The application spoke to maybe a handful of people are there a week. So, we're talking about a pretty low impact in terms of just passenger vehicles or sedans or SUVs driving on the streets and there for a period of time. But I would love to hear from the neighbors your perspective of those parcels, because what is being talked about is the potential continuation or the expansion of what's currently there. And I want to hear how that's been impacting the neighborhood so I can get a sense of how vehicle storage is working on that Osmond corridor. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim, anything?
No questions.
Sue, for staff? No? The proposed zoning, which was the C3, that would tie into traffic that is less intensive than the M1 traffic?
No, the concern about traffic is use dependent, not zoning dependent. It's based on the industrial use of the site. So, yeah. Does that answer?
Well, but it's still, if it's C3 and the study showed that the traffic was not compatible with what Jesse would allow, C3 still brings in the same traffic, or no?
Correct, because it's use dependent. So since they're proposing a industrial type use,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Okay. That's my question. So if we can have our applicant approach the podium, please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Charles Corkum, 339 South Paddock.
Very
We'll
good.
actually need the microphone turned on, and sorry to do that to you, but it's the button. You got it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Charles Corkum, 339 South Paddock.
Great, thank you. Would you like to add anything to the presentation?
Yeah, to go back to the issue with respect to traffic that Michael mentioned, I think probably on average we get 3 or 4 of our customers visiting the facility on a weekly basis. Oftentimes they come in a car, they leave in a car, no additional traffic on the road. We probably take delivery of a vehicle with a larger truck maybe 2-3 times per year. I would suggest that the traffic generated by our facility is less than that of a residential neighborhood.
Okay, that's helpful. I was going to ask you about delivery of vehicles in a larger vehicle.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, please, go right ahead.
So historically, this was an industrial site, and we're talking old school industrial automotive site using the railroad as a transport system and service. And that was historically what was on your current location at 339 South Paddock. So did you have to do much environmental remediation for the site for the previous parcel? And is it your anticipation that there might be some other ugliness underneath the layers of soil?
Yeah, I think that, and we did provide a report from the same engineer that we worked with when we got involved with 339 Paddock. And he opined as to what he thought the conditions would be, we would encounter on parcel 002. But yeah, I think we acquired that property from the state of Michigan. It was in the Michigan Land Bank.
Meaning the South Paddock location?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, Paddock Vehicle Storage. And I think the state had spent upwards of $40,000 at that time in just investigation and some rudimentary remedial action that was taken, and it was deemed at that point. And I think you have some of the drillings from the phase 2 where they indicate that the site is not suitable for residential development. They came back, we used the same company that went back and had the Sanborn maps and the use history going back to the early 1900s. And they're essentially saying the same thing with parcel 002. The likelihood that that parcel could ever be developed as R1 or residential is slim to none, without expending money that would never be recovered in a residential type development.
And you've
The
added...
standards, if I may, just, for for non-residential use, the standards for, remediation are not the same. Nobody's living on site. It's a different theory. We had to remove an underground storage tank. We had to be careful of any soils that were shipped off-site. We prepared a BEA that we have to and will continue to live by as long as we operate at the property.
And a BEA stands for?
Baseline environmental analysis.
Okay. And what would residents who live nearby, what should they expect with the site? Because obviously it's been overgrown, especially at the fence line. It's a visual obstruction. It's overcrowding the sidewalk, and you do not own it. So I'm talking about what it is right now, vacant land. For about 45 years, it's been sit vacant.
Right.
Before that, it had a good generations of industrial use. But at least in the last 15 years that I've noticed, it's felt very overgrown, untended. I'm not even sure who the owner is, so I'm not trying to throw shade. It's just, what should residents expect should this project proceed? Would it be a continuation of what has been very aesthetically improved for your current site? What should the residents expect?
Yeah, I mean, they should expect exactly what is in place at, with the existing paddock vehicle storage development. The architecture, the site design would be in keeping and flow with exactly what we have there now. The site, when we acquired 339 Paddock, wasn't too dissimilar from that of parcel 002, although it didn't have fencing. It relied on, tree logs, around the perimeter to try to keep dumping off site and things like that. But it was an open, building that wasn't secured. And I think that the feedback we've received from the neighbors that we're in regular contact with and have developed relationships with over the few years we've been there has been extremely favorable.
So it would be landscaped, tended. What would it be? A similar lighting impact?
Similar lighting, similar paving, curbing,
fencing. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Very good. Tim, anything?
No, I mean, we went through this last time. I don't really have any comments other than, or no questions, other than it's a great property that you've done so far. So.
Great, thank you. Sue, anything for our applicant?
Yes. You said you get a delivery maybe 2 or 3 times a year of vehicles. Is it just one vehicle?
Yeah,
And
typically one vehicle.
is it on a car hauler or?
An enclosed car hauler, sometimes just a large pickup truck with a trailer. It might come with 2 cars, 3 cars, but yeah. Somebody buys a car at auction, it's delivered, to Paddock Vehicle Storage.
The vehicles that you store there, I'm just curious, are they street legal vehicles?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. That answers my questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I don't have any questions at the moment.
I do have one additional.
Go ahead, Michael.
I'm sorry that it came to me when Commissioner Sinclair was asking her question. Based on what I'm reviewing of what sort of preliminary plans for the site, is that it would be a continuation of your existing vehicle storage operation with the other adjacent parcel. So would you have an additional entrance on Osmond and South Jesse, or would it sort of, the existing entrance would suffice, so you're not aiming to have additional points of entrance?
The existing entrance would suffice. The additional capacity to store wouldn't necessarily increase to any great degree the volume of traffic to the property with the people that are there. We could, there's a number of people that have additional cars, the same individuals that would probably lease additional space in the new building.
How many storage spaces are in your existing?
34 on the ground level.
And what would be your proposed expansion for?
I think we determined it would be about 30 cars on the floor.
Okay. So for those that owned property or live nearby, it's not as though you're adding, phase 2 is 3 times as big.
No.
It's
actually
small, it's
smaller.
comparable or smaller.
Smaller.
Okay. Thank you.
Very good. All right, if no one else has any questions for our applicant, I'm going to open public hearing. So if you would please approach the podium, state your name and address for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to state your thoughts about this application. And once you have taken your seat, please remain quiet. And if you have questions, we'll try and get you answers once we have closed public hearing. So I'm going to open public hearing.
Thank you very much. Chuck Johnson here. I live at 21 North Paddock Road. I'm a property owner of some vacant property on Paddock and Elm Street, and that's the reason why I was a little bit concerned. I do know the developer. He's did a great job on his existing property, and it's an asset to the community. However, back when I first knew the property, it was an old concrete batch plant years ago before it came Miller's store, and then on the side, what is known to be the railroad right away was an old coal yard. And I did most of the demolition in that area, so that's why I know what's happening. Anyways, I want to commend the developer for his effort to bring something new and different in the area. But what bothers me the most here is that the city of Pontiac is at a point now where we're trying to get our people back, our population growth back where it needs to be, and it's certainly happening day by day. And if we start taking what little bit of residential property that we have left and turn it into manufacturing or commercial property, what are we going to do whenever the home builders come to the city and say, well, where can we find some vacant property that's suitable for building houses? This property is a perfect spot to continue the growth in that area. Wall Street, Jesse Street, the whole area right in there has a lot of brand new homes and more to come. And I'm sure that some builder is going to come and want to build there. Now, the reason why that property is sitting vacant for so long, it's owned by the Maroon family, Manny Maroon. And he owns properties all over the city, and he gets them for little or nothing. He had a trucking operation there probably 40 years ago. I demolished the property, and of course, back then, we were able, per city code, leave the concrete in the ground and just cover it over. So I'm almost willing to believe that there is still a lot of concrete in the ground that will have to be remediated if it's approved for him. But it's my honest opinion and hope that the city does not cut the residents in R1 and in that area, don't cut us short, because we need R1 property so that we can build homes and have something available for those developers who would come and build new homes. And I know they're coming. We're looking at the new development there on that school on Sanford Street. And we're looking at new development there on Paddock. Hopefully that old...
It's your time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Everett C. at 393 Going Street, Pontiac. First, I'd just like to say the Paddock property. I was raised in that area all my life when there was a cement factory there, and truck stop and coal yard, and then after being elected councilman for that area, we had an initiative of building homes, and with Lighthouse and Habitat for Humanity, we would hope they would spur a growth. And it happened. I mean, it's the biggest problem we had actually was going to the banks trying to get comps. They didn't want to, trying to get comps, but we prevailed. And the issue I have with this project is that it's the M1 designation. This gentleman has good intentions. He has kept his word. He has done, made the improvements of the community. But once the zoning is changed, it's like pulling elephant teeth. If it's M1, then someone else who's less congenial, can say, hey, I want a plastic injection mold company in here. And I don't know how you can accommodate where he can establish his business, because I'm just really impressed with it. And at the same time, but this M1 zoning is just, it's terrible for it. That whole area was all along the railroad tracks was M1. And trying to hew out a community with M1s dotted all throughout, we didn't have the opportunity. Pontiac did not have the opportunity to have a pre-planned community like so many others. It was industry, then residential around it, and it was just a patch, it was just terrible. So finally, after we hewing out a community, basically, is how can we coexist on a project such as this, And I think that we lead that up to the finer minds of the zoning and planning and so forth to do that. But Mr. Johnson is right. Residential is needed badly. I heard the report to say that there's possibly not suitable. Well, I haven't seen that. I have to read that. I have to see that because we built on so-called unsuitable property. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Honors to everyone here and on television. Brian Killian Bay, resident at 32 Mary Day, property owner on Paddock Street, born and raised actually on Paddock and have property on Osmond. I do like what the gentleman has brought in the beginning, but I do think our R1 currently in Pontiac should be sacred. We don't have enough, and we're now going to give up more. This is my problem with that. We continuously say we want our city to move forward and positively and grow, but you're cutting down the same exact reasons that we can't grow by determining something that's manufacturing from residential. We have to really think about our residents and moving forward. We're trying to grow and expand. This is one of our problems in our school districts. Taxes, where they come from. They generally come from where? Our residents. And if you're decreasing where they can live, you're decreasing that money that is available to our schools and a depreciation to our children that's growing. We're in badly need of recreation. We're in badly need of housing. And this, I don't think, will spark the idea of moving forward as far as with that subject. And I hope it's well thought about with the resident and the developers might be able to want to do something else. Because we got to start looking at not what's the need of individuals, but what's the need of the community. That's the most important thing. Thank you for the time. Peace.
Thank you.
Good afternoon to listening ears in TV land and to the board here. Darlene Clark, 506 Nebraska, property 408 Osmond Street as well. The concern, and I agree, the one common denominator that Mr. C and Mr. Bryan and Mr. Chuck has said was that we have to look at the residents. It's no really hardship against the investors that's trying to improve their business. But it is a hardship when you're not looking at the residential around you and you're looking at the dollar signs to suit you. That's a big problem. You're not looking at the mothers and the fathers and the workers and the sons and daughters who gets up in the morning and have to run down Osmond Street to go to work. You're not looking at the people on days off. They want to be outside in their yards enjoying their families and their babies and trying to achieve something that they don't have time to achieve on a regular basis. You're looking at bringing in vehicles. The answer that you had was not to bring it down there because the recommendation, the streets themselves was not ready for it. It's not prepared for it, but yet you continue to want to take it under consideration and saying, well, hey, we're going to squeeze it in. So squeezing it in, legally you're pushing people out. Every day, Pontiac dwindles. You're bringing home improvement, but you're not bringing for the people who built Pontiac. You're trying to keep them on bended knees so they can leave so you can do what you have to do. This project that you're doing, like he said, and each guy that came up here to represent the area, you just put in new homes. You put in new homes. Osmond Street is not that big and not that wide. Traffic would be coming in from Martin Luther King, from Auburn Street, all over. When this man go home at night and he shut that office door, he don't know what's coming in. He don't know how the trucks park there at night to make sure to be there when he wake up in the morning. He doesn't understand the circumstances of what's here. Now, seeing all of that, where does the resident play a part? You are to represent the resident as well as the investor. But so far, in listening to what I'm hearing, you're only representing the investor. Your ideal is not bad, but you're turning our main streets into commercial street. It's a R1 residential. Keep it that way. Keep it there so the hardworking people can continue to enjoy their families. Because when he go home to his, it's no trucks going down the streets. He has no street lights. We have street lights, barely have those. So don't take that from those residents.
Thank you. Is there more? Anyone else would like to make a comment for public comment? If not, I am going to close public comment. All right, if you wanted to return to the podium, it sounds like you wanted to get back up there.
Excuse me, just a couple of points, and I'm sensitive to the comments that the residents in the area made. But I think that the issue is, will that parcel ever be able to be developed as single-family residential? And I think that the science in the testing that was done says no, it won't.
Okay, but what we're going to do is, we understand your position of the request to rezone, and we're appreciating that our audience remains quiet. Staff, did you want to say anything in answer to any of the items that were brought up from our residents?
Can I ask a question?
Sure, go right ahead.
And this is a staff question. If the condition they're offering, let's say 10 years down the road, they sell the property, it gets torn down, does that condition stay with the property, or could somebody do a manufacturing plant there?
It would stay with the property, say if the use was actually built and then it was torn down in 10 years. However, any other use that was proposed, no matter what that is, would need to go through another rezoning process so this would really restrict what is there to the indoor vehicle storage and any accessory use with that.
Okay, good, thank you.
Michael, do you have any questions after hearing public comment?
I appreciate those that spoke, and I want to salute my predecessor on the city council for the East Side, the Honorable Everett C. Happy birthday to you, by the way. That what he spoke to in terms of a renaissance of new residential construction, he and other past city leaders definitely got it and saw that we needed an all-hands-on-deck approach. This is something he shared with me before, where depending on the development, depending on the housing opportunity, the answer is we want more of it. We need, on the east side, there was so much vacancy, loss, demolition, that there needed to be replacement and rebirth. The parcel, though, and I'm grateful that residents shared that, the one we're talking about, it might have an R1 slapped on it, but it has never been an R1. It has never been residential. It has been industrial manufacturing of varying intensities, but that's been its life cycle. So it's privately owned now. We learned that from a member of the public. So it's privately owned, so they would be presumably paying taxes, but they're paying taxes on vacant land, which is a fraction of what the value is to us, the residents and taxpayers of Pontiac, that it's a structure that adds a lot more value. So if it is developed with a structure, then it becomes of greater value. And then also the value of curbside appeal? How is it, the property being utilized? So I'm not seeing it as you're either choosing housing or vehicle storage. I think we're choosing vehicle storage or continued purgatory of vacant undeveloped land. And as I say that as somebody who is a major proponent, as this evening's rest of the agenda will show, that we need a lot more housing of a lot more varieties in a lot more places. Our population today in Pontiac is about 62,000, and at our height, we're about 80,000. Some of that was people had a lot more kids. So we had the same number of houses and apartments, but there was just a bigger family unit. But we have seen a loss, a contracting and downsizing of how many homes and apartments there are. There is growth for that. I don't know that saying that this parcel has to be only residential, I don't think that closes the door on that in many, many other parts of the city where there is a lot of land or, property that can be hopefully made more dense. We have in proximity to this location, maybe if it's not overlapping this location, we've approved residential infill overlay districts. And I just want to amplify that for everyone, because what it means is that where there used to be just single-family homes, there can now be duplexes, and there can now be, the openness to accessory dwelling units, meaning like grandmother's suites or et cetera, that we want to see more density, which historically this and other East Side neighborhoods had. And we are in a lot better shape today than we were 20 years ago, in part because of the work of Everett C. and others that have come and gone, different organizations of Lighthouse, of Habitat for Humanity, of Community Housing Network. We want more of that, but I also want to make sure that these awkward spots, these awkward slivers, don't get doomed to vacant and undeveloped, because I don't think that helps the neighborhood, and it definitely doesn't help the city's tax base. But I raise all that just to say I hear a lot of this. This has been very illuminating. I want to know if the applicant has any further frame of reference on, you would have been the applicant that sought it being zoned from R1 to M1 at your current location, correct?
Correct.
Can you speak any further context of the historical perspective? I would assume you are currently paying property taxes. It was made about who helps the schools. It's actually our businesses pay a lot more into the pot for our schools, because if you're a homeowner, you are frozen at your homeowner rate. And once you're a non-homeowner, it's higher. And if it's a non-homeowner that's commercial, it's even higher. Right. It's one of the reasons why Pontiac School District is a rarity in the state, because in our district, we have all that commercial property in Auburn Hills, that northern strip. They're in the Pontiac School District. So it makes us out of formula. They're paying so much. So in fact, we've been hurt as a school district, and at least as a city, because of how much commercial tax base has left us, has hollowed out. This is a very small, this isn't going to change the calculation dramatically, but anything that's been shared that you can help bring perspective of when you went from R1 to M1, it was obviously private, the state had it, so the state wasn't paying any taxes, but you're carrying a tax bill as a commercial property, non-home state.
Yeah, we are, and our assessment is just shy of $2 million right now.
Okay. Yeah, and so if we pulled the numbers on this parcel 003, it would be a fraction of that, maybe, it'd be very, very, very low. So it definitely wouldn't be in the six figures. Your associate might have more information. $50,000 is the assessment. Okay. So I just want to provide that perspective that by having a structure, even if it was residential, if there was a residential, apartment building or something there, that would just be massively bigger tax contribution than vacant land, of which our city has a ton, and the East Side has a ton, and we'd have even more if not for the Everett C's and the others who have done some infill, but we have a lot more room to grow on the East Side, and I know for other cities, but we're looking at the East Side, other parts of the city, but this is an East Side piece of land, so that's what I'm thinking about.
All right.
I'll stop there.
All right, very good, thank you. Tim, any additional ideas? Thanks. Sue, go ahead.
I just want to thank Commissioner McGinnis for pointing out that this has actually never been utilized ever for residential one. So it's not really like we're taking away from R1. I hear you, we need a lot more housing, but this is cost prohibitive when it comes to single-family residential. Could you please clarify trucks?
Yeah.
We're talking about a trailer that is similar to like a landscape trailer, correct? When
In some
vehicles are
cases, yes.
delivered. We're not talking about the car haulers that have 10, 12, 20,
Right.
whatever, however many they haul.
Yeah, I can tell you that there is more truck traffic generated on a residential street from moving vans, from landscape trucks, than Paddock produces. We are probably, as far as truck traffic, no more than a residential user.
Right. Thank you for, I just wanted to emphasize that point, that it's not a car hauler.
I think in 24 to date, we've had 3 car deliveries that came on a trailer.
Okay, thank you, I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
And just, another point, I'd just like to say that, since we developed 339 Paddock, there was a vacant lot across from us that was developed, built, and there's a home there today. And as far as I know, it's the only home that was developed on a vacant lot on Osmond. And I think it's clear that one of the reasons the developer chose to come in and build on that lot was because now the improvement to that block, that in part was, with the Paddock vehicle storage development.
All right, thank you. Thank you for staying with us and listening to what everyone has to say, and thank you for engaging with the residents. And to piggyback on what you said, but also to address one of the comments or a few of the comments made by the residents, when a builder looks at a parcel, especially a parcel of that size, they have to run numbers to determine how much they need to spend to prepare a parcel in order to make their investment work. So oftentimes, it's not what is being built on top of the ground that is so expensive, it's what's happening under the ground. And because of what we know the history to be there, there's been a lot of heavy commercial use, and we already know on parcel 001 that you've done your environmental studies on that there was a lot of expense in order to get your site prepared for what you put on top of it. And there are things that would prohibit being built there because of what's under the ground, as you'd mentioned at the beginning of your comments today. So indeed, if we could get more new construction in the city, we would be all thrilled as residents. I completely agree. A builder's perspective, they would not necessarily gravitate to that lot first because of the expense in order to get that parcel ready in order to build anything on top of it that someone would be living on, be it apartments, condos, you name it, that would not be a first choice. When you did the rezoning from R1 to M1, was it ever talked about for the different zoning? Was it just that you wanted it to be M1?
M1 was our only alternative that would provide vehicle storage. I mean, if there was a Z1 zoning, we would have taken that so long as it provided vehicle storage. That's why we have no problem with the conditional zoning that is limiting, the use in that parcel to vehicle storage forever until somebody else, thinks they have a better idea, and they're still going to have to come before the Planning Commission and City Council to get it changed from anything but vehicle storage. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, the concerns of the residents that, today it's vehicle storage, tomorrow you could be storing nuclear waste there. It's just, it couldn't happen. And I, sure that they trust the commission to, look out for their best interests in the future should somebody, and that's in the event that, we ever decide to, do away with the business. And I tell you that we're in it for the long haul.
Okay. One thing that I have a question about is overnight parking. Can you speak to that a little bit, please?
There is no overnight parking there.
Okay.
I mean, the gates, there's access to property by fob. If you rent space there, you get in with a fob that's specific to that individual. You leave, we know who's coming and going when, but there's no overnight parking. And there's never, and never has there been any overnight truck parking there.
Okay, so when your
If a car
vehicles,
comes in, the car is met by the driver, it's offloaded, and the truck is out of there, you know, and truck and trailer within 20 minutes.
okay.
If I may add just
Yes,
real quick,
please.
because you had expressed earlier concern
Yes.
about outdoor vehicle storage.
Yes.
But the condition supplied by the applicant specifically states they are only doing indoor vehicle storage.
Okay, so that addresses that as an umbrella, basically. Okay, very good. Well, if we don't have any other
I
questions,
do have two quick points.
please, go ahead.
To Mr. Johnson's feedback, I think why we see the site, and it has like, basically it's just grass in the middle, I think it's to your very point, that there's concrete that's preventing noxious trees or whatever. Otherwise, after 45 years, that would be a whole lot of trees. But I think there's concrete there, so that's helpful perspective. I want to thank you for that. And the point that Mr. Johnson made is very on the nose. We aren't talking about fresh farmland that's never been touched before or virgin forest. We are dealing with the patchwork of years of different uses, industrial right next to residential, and this ain't easy. There is no easy, smooth, or affordable, cheap way to do it. There's a lot of expense and burden because we are essentially paying for the sins of money makers of the past, right? You know, they went with what worked. They had employees right across the street could come and do their work and load in and out of the railroad, and so here we are. I do want to share for the neighbors and the community's benefit, the long-term vision is that rail right-of-way, which is no longer necessarily a right-of-way, but the vision is that would be a walking or pedestrian trail. And as somebody that's been on the Clinton River Trail on our side, but also the Auburn Hills side, they have many different uses or buildings that back up to the trail, but it's still very neat, tidy, presentable, well-lit, landscaped. So I don't view that as incompatible in terms of if 30 years from now we have a beautiful recreational pathway that is to the south of this particular site, just like the current paddock vehicle storage. I don't view those as not being harmonious. And I'll just say to the applicant, no matter what happens here, I salute that you've been very thoughtful about how you've imposed on the surrounding residential neighborhood. I have never heard a contrary word where they said, you won't believe the noise, you won't believe, you know, they're acting like that's what's going on and it's some sort of bait and switch, they've got a heavy use. No, it is very essentially quiet, low impact, well tended to, and so that should you acquire this land and should it be an extension of your current site, I just encourage you to take that same approach. Keep an open dialogue with the residents nearby. Think about if it were your home, how's the light, how's the landscaping, is it tidy? And I'm not as concerned about the truck aspect, one, because of the low volume that we've witnessed over the years, but also what's been represented here. And the entryway isn't changing. It's the same entryway as the current use, so it would not add new impact to Jesse. It would be similar impact to Osmond. And I want to say that Osmond is looking great with all of the substantial, beautiful homes, and it's still this awkwardness of we have a whole giant old auto factory that used to be then the Sears warehouse closer to Woodward. We're still, over the years, in many different parcels, having to marry and blend the past with the future. And this is a smaller, awkward one, but I'm grateful that you've even looked at it, because we can't just leave these sort of landlocked, weird pieces of land vacant forever and just keep kicking the can. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. All right, would someone like to make a motion? Would you like to make a motion?
I can spread the wealth. It doesn't have to be me.
I can do it, John.
Go ahead.
I move to recommend approval of the proposed rezoning of 339 South Paddock from R1 to M1 based on findings of facts outlined in the staff report and with the conditions supplied by the applicant.
Support.
All right.
Commissioner McGinnis,
Yes to approve, or recommend approval.
Commissioner Shepard,
Yes to approve.
Commissioner Sinclair,
Yes to approve.
Commissioner Parlov.
Yes to approve.
All right, motion passes.
Congratulations.
And that will go to City Council next, where there's 2 readings. So if people still want to weigh in, they have an opportunity to find out more, engage with the applicant. That will be 2 readings required before the council can render a verdict.
The first reading will likely be on October 8th, but we'll confirm with the applicant when that is confirmed on the agenda.
Thank you. All right, next we are going to, I would like to do public comment, and then maybe we can do our minutes. Let's get the public comment addressed. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up the meeting to public comment. You can speak about any item you wish, and you'll have 3 minutes to state your thoughts. Once you have stated your thoughts, please return to your seat and remain quiet until after public comment has finished and for the rest of the meeting. So please approach the podium, state your name and address for the record. Public comment is open.
Good evening, Jen Burke, 193 East Iroquois in Pontiac. I just wanted to speak ahead of time. I'm the District 2 co-chair for our community group, and one of the agenda items this evening is, I believe it's called 239 Voorhees is the address. I just wanted to make the commission aware that that address has been discussed during multiple D2 meetings. I believe it's been 4 or 5 meetings over this past year. A lot of concern just about the parking situation and the overflow into the neighborhood. A lot of residents just not satisfied. They love the look of the building. They appreciate the improvements, but the parking situation is a big concern for them. So again, just wanted to share that with the commission. Like I said, it's been discussed. It's been a concern. Wanted to make you aware. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, Everett C. 393 Going Street. I guess the real question would be, with the zoning and the planning commission, what are the plans as far as designating residential potential developers to come in? Now that we have, where you have GFL, is tons of land that's there. Is that land suitable or not? Have we done a comprehensive study as relates to where do we want to put place houses at? I think that would allow a developer to come in and say, hey, I'd like to put up this there, and it is not in compliance with where we're trying to go as a community. It can't work out to where I think that it's incumbent upon the city leaders to look at new lands that has come available. What is the potential for developing residential duplexes and get those? If we're planning on having a stabilized city in housing and come up to where we need to be when people are driving in here from Amazon, UAW, whatever, and say, hey, I'd like to live there. I don't have to deal with the traffic and so forth. Well, how are we meeting that demand? And I think it's incumbent upon us to truly look at this, because if we don't, we're going to have those way off pieces of land. We say, well, we can use it for this because there's no one that's come forward. I think it's incumbent that we put forth the effort, find out what brownfields are eligible to reclaim. When they took M1 and they said, okay, that was the likely the only use that they could use with that, with the ground that was there, but they made a use of it, and it's a use. So what's next? You got where Fisher Body was. You have tons of land. Well, I think we probably have about 150 acres that's developable that we should start looking at, and so that's really the question. Where do we go from here?
Thank you. Okay, if no one else would like to comment, I'm going to close public comment. thank you for your thoughts and your information. Let us address the minutes.
Actually, as a matter of business, just because it's been requested, is it possible we can get a motion from Planning Commission to excuse the 2 members that are not here? I know one specifically asked to be excused, and that would be Commissioner Northcross as well as Commissioner Duvall.
I make a motion to excuse Commissioner Christopher Northcross and Commissioner Vernita Duval.
Support.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? No. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay. Michael, do you have any adjustments to the minutes?
I do, and if it helps, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes so we have it before us, if there's a second.
Support.
Okay. So now that we have that motion before us, Mona Parlove spells her name with the E at the end.
I
So
do.
Parlove with an E.
Thank you.
And then my father was at last month's Planning Commission meeting, so he spoke under public comment because a McInnes always has something to say. And I want to make sure I've got that. Public comment, so page, under number 7, page number 8. Louis McGinnis spells his first name Louis, and our last name is McGuinness. The street that he lives on Pontiac Norrells, Court Street, is Court. And he asked if park space, not parking space, and again, Court Street is spelled Court. So that's his public comment. Not that I agree with it. There's a park a few steps down at Charlie Harrison Park, but I digress. That was his public comment.
Thank you for that. Tim, anything for the minutes?
No.
All right. Sue?
Last page, below where it says Commissioner Huntley made a motion to bifurcate ZMA 24-003. The yes votes, note 5, should note 4. Those are my only comments. Thank you.
Because at that time, people had departed.
I did not vote in the affirmative.
Oh, so there'd be no votes?
It'd be 4 yes, 1 no, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Because we got 2, 4, we got 6 commissioners that were present that night. Did we have a commissioner that was departed by then?
I'll review the video and check.
Okay. We'll just want to make sure we've got that total right. And then the Parlov spelling is throughout the document, so there's a lot of E's to add in.
It's a very important letter. So actually, when I'm looking through this, they're all 5 yeses. There's a vote count missing here. Everyone was in attendance. No, Vernita was not there that night. So it should be 6 votes, not 5, right?
Well, I could have been, I was late. I'm chronically late, so
but
there
all
could be a
these-
few yeses at the beginning that were 5 and then become 6.
Everything is a 5 is a yes. There are no nays.
Because there's the minute adopting.
I'll run through the video and check all the counts. I didn't do the minutes, so I didn't check this part.
Okay.
I did also note, when it was the public hearing, there was a few residents of Princeton Street. The spelling in the minutes are incorrect. That street on the north side is like the university, Princeton.
All right. Did they spell your name properly, Tim?
Sure.
Okay.
Looked right.
All right, so I guess those are the notations. Should we adopt these now, since you're going to go back and check?
How should we handle that?
That's up to Planning Commission if they want to review the updated minutes, or
Did you catch that? So it's up to you guys. We can either bring the minutes back next meeting and adopt them then, or you can adopt now with the changes proposed.
I'm good with either.
I'm comfortable with the administrative review and verification of the
The numbers.
explicit roll call votes.
And actually, I just would like to add, this is important to get these minutes approved because of the appeal of 225 Columbia that was held at this meeting. So those minutes have to go to, approved minutes have to go to city council. We can always send a draft, but it's nice to send approved minutes.
All right. So then we need the proposal with the modification?
No, meaning that we'd want the vote tonight, so that way the appeal can go
Right.
forward.
Right. So do we need to make a motion with the adjustment?
I already made the motion, so we have that before us of adopting the minutes. And I'll ask the city attorney if we need any further motion to amend, or if incorporating the changes is enough.
I would move to amend to incorporate the changes.
Madam Chair, I have a motion to amend the commission minutes before us that incorporating the spelling changes and confirm the roll call votes of pertinent decisions.
Excellent. Any support?
Support.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any nays?
So
No.
that's the amendment, and now we have the minutes as amended,
Yes.
which you can call for the vote now unless there's more.
Can we do the vote now?
Do you want to do roll call?
Sure.
All
Let's do
right.
that.
Commissioner McGinnis,
Yes to approve.
Commissioner Shepard,
Yes to approve.
Commissioner Sinclair,
Yes to approve?
Commissioner Parlov.
Yes to approve. All good? Okay. Now we're going to old business. Is there any old business that we need to address?
I do not have any.
Okay. Next, then, we will go to our new business, which is application PZC 24-038, Chevrolet Miles. It's for 239 Voorhees. It's a waiver of 5 parking spaces as a request. The application is regarding the parking reduction request.
All right, so today's request, you've seen a few of these now. They're kind of becoming familiar to you, I think. The applicant for 239 Voorhees would like to put a place of assembly and an office in the existing structure at this location. In order to do so and be compliant with the zoning ordinance, he needs to provide 19 parking spaces. However, due to the size of the lot, we cannot find room for more than 14. So he is coming to you today to request a waiver of 5 spaces. The place of assembly is proposed for the first floor and office on the second. Places of assembly for less than 50 persons do not require a special exception permit and can be reviewed and approved administratively, which is why this did not come before the Planning Commission previously. The zoning ordinance requires 1 space per 3 persons permitted at maximum occupancy for places of assembly, and 1 space per 300 square feet of floor area for the office. Based on these requirements, we arrived at 19 required spaces. Due to constraints with fitting this number of parking spaces on the site, the applicant is proposing a 5-space reduction to 14 parking spaces. 239 Voorhees is Zone C1, local business, but it sits within a larger neighborhood that is primarily R1, one-family dwelling. The parcel directly to the east is also Zone C1, but the rest are zoned R1 on all sides. That parcel directly to the east is undeveloped. These are the site plans. We have not approved anything yet. We are still working through the site plan review, and we identified this parking as an issue, which is why we routed the applicant to this body. But the current arrangement that we've worked out is what you see on this screen. It's also been passed out to everyone here. The applicant has fit 14 spaces here along the, what I would believe to be the south lot line, and then here along the west lot line. One of the recent changes was there has to be a buffer yard here where adjacent to residential over here. For that reason, we had to bump the parking spaces back another 5 feet, reducing the maneuvering lane to, I believe, 21 feet. Previous drafts had parking spaces right here. Staff required access drives to be clear, so that eliminated any availability for parking right here. No buffer is required on the east side of the property due to the fact that the parcel right here is Zone C1. So really the only directly adjacent residential is to the south. Oops. There we go. This is the zoning map. So as you can see, it sits within a C of R1. But this it's just a 1-block stretch right here on the south side of Voorhees that has all C1 zoning. This parcel is undeveloped. There are structures here. The property right here is the one that we are discussing today. There were several enforcement actions taken against this property in January and February of 2024. As a result of these enforcement actions, the applicant has applied for zoning approval as a first step toward addressing the various tickets. I won't go through them all. Essentially, he needed to get permits, and so that's what he is doing now. Due to the fact that the applicant is not proposing any alterations to the footprint of the building, and since the proposed uses are permitted by right, it was determined that this request should be reviewed administratively. The relevant regulation is section 4.304. This is what gives the Planning Commission the ability to modify the numerical requirements for off-street parking based on evidence submitted by the applicant that another standard would be more reasonable because of the level of current or future employment or customer traffic. The Planning Commission may condition the approval of a modification of the parking requirements that bind such approval to the specific use in question. That last sentence doesn't apply since you're not the final approval authority for this request. You're just making a determination on this specific waiver. This is an aerial of the site, kind of giving you an idea of how it sits within the neighborhood. You can see this is the existing structure. This is the parking lot as it currently exists. You can see there are single-family homes directly to the south, as well as on all sides, basically. Here's the vacant lot. Here are the existing structures and another vacant lot. These all right here are the C1 portion. Due to the fact that there are no standards for review of this type of request, staff is not making any recommendation for or against. Staff recommends the Planning Commission review the applicant's site plan and argument to determine whether this reduction is reasonable. And with that, I have sample motions.
Very good. Michael, any questions for staff?
When you're referencing no standards, is that sort of standards for review just because no ordinance has been adopted by the city yet in terms of waiving of parking, or is that kind of what we're speaking to?
Basically, so typically in the cases that you see, it's a standard application, a site plan, a special exception, and the ordinance outlines 5 to 10 standards by which you make your decision. Waivers are not given that same treatment in the ordinance, so we really have no guidance.
And is there a precedence of the Planning Commission considering waivers of parking that have reached this body?
Yes.
Because I know that the City Council did with the Casa del Rey residential proposed residential development, but what's our recent frame of reference?
So I believe it was Casa del Rey.
Yeah, we've had, I think, 3 parking waivers since I've been here, and they've all been for multifamily. So this is, I believe, the first one that we have seen before Planning Commission for something that is commercial, not multifamily.
And typically, sorry if I may, just to provide more context, those cases that came before, typically the argument that was presented was due to the fact that the clientele or residents of the proposed multifamily do not drive multiple cars, and so the standard in the ordinance did not apply. That was the basis for most previous decisions, but like Mark said, this is our first commercial request.
It is zoned C1? Yes. And the land adjacent, at least along Voorhees, is C1 as well.
Yep.
Does it already have, or has it historically had rental units that we've seen?
I'm not sure.
Because it obviously was a house. It was a house and they slapped a business on it many decades ago. I remember the sign is New Tech or something?
Laser Renew.
Laser Renew, okay.
It was for ink cartridges,
In cartridges.
toner cartridges.
So is there a historical reference of there being residential use?
If you give me 2 minutes, I could.
Okay, you're looking it up, that's helpful. Because I'm just trying to get a sense of how many units are, and the applicant will be able to amplify further in terms of what we're looking going forward. But so there's the dynamic of residential use versus commercial use. Do we, with planning decisions, get shared like what the fire marshal occupancy limit is for a space? Because it's, for a place of assembly, it's a gathering, it's a, celebration, a party, a convening, an assembly. So it's helpful to know how many people is the maximum. When you configure space, if you got tables, you got seating, it cuts down on it, but what's the fire marshal say? Because right here, and sir, I can't see with the glare, but 140? Obviously, it'd be very hard to squeeze 140 people in here. But the space in theory with the walls, the square footage would allow an assemblage of that many people. So we're looking here at maybe 40 people seated comfortably for what the fire marshal says could be 140. But is that shared with us in planning, like what the fire department identifies as like a human limit to a space?
So these plans were routed to the fire department. They're the ones that determined the maximum occupancy could not exceed 50 in this location.
Okay.
So that's the only guidance I've gotten on that.
Okay, that's helpful. And I'll wait to hear more from the applicant. But so I haven't been in this parking lot. Is there a current buffer between the residents on Ruth and beyond? Do we know?
What do you mean by buffer?
Well, so the 5-foot buffer that exists right now, what's the current configuration of that adjacent property?
Currently, there is a fence. I believe it's chain link, but the applicant can speak to that. It does not meet our current requirements for buffer. Yeah, so that's why we're proposing this 5-foot bump out.
Okay. Did you find any past use in terms of rental property? Or?
Yes, it's hard to determine rental property, but this is looking more like it's been a multifamily commercial use. It's had this layout since between 1983 and 73. So prior to 73 and prior, it looked a little bit more residential in character. It's always had that parking lot for the last 45 to 50 years, though.
Yeah, in the last 25 years, all I can remember is vacant land, those cool old, commercial storefronts that have seemed empty forever, and then more vacant land. So I welcome if anyone has from, what you remember of that corridor, because it's like this commercial wedged in with a lot of residential, which isn't crazy. It's just, hopefully there can be more continuity in the future.
Okay, all set? Go ahead, Tim.
I'll hold my questions for you.
Okay, Sue.
I'm going to hold my questions for the applicant so the applicant can speak, but I'm definitely going to want some staff feedback on some items. Thank you.
Okay, what I do know about that area, Michael, because I would drive by it very often, I've never, ever, ever seen anything happening in the very cool old buildings that have I think it's the blonde brick. I think that building was condemned recently. It's been for sale. I don't know what happened with all that, but there's never been anything there as a business. I think people were maybe living in there. Sometimes I would see some lights on, but I never saw cars coming or going. Regarding this parcel that we're talking about, this had been the business that it is for since, I would say, at least probably 87. It was a business that was purchased by the employee. So it was very low impact. It was a matter of bringing in cartridges to refill them and then returning them to customers. I think there may have been an apartment on the second floor that was rented out intermittently, but other than that, it was very, very low key. Definitely not the proposed use for the current owner, if that helps. Sure. Okay. All right, so if we can have our applicant approach the podium, state your name and address for the record.
Chavez Miles, 239 Voorhees.
Very good. Would you like to add anything to the presentation?
Yes, so I purchased the property in November of 2023. I currently own a real estate company. My previous address was in Bloomfield. I live in Pontiac, so I wanted to move the office closer to where I live. I'm about 5 minutes from here in Stonegate. So when I walked into the building, I seen it as an office space, but I also seen that it could have more use. So that's where I came up with the idea for it to be a meeting space. When I purchased the building, we did almost total facelift. We cut down all the bad trees and vines in the back, had the parking lot resurfaced, had the building repainted, had the whole inside redone so that it would be a presentable space, so that it would beautify the neighborhood as well. My proposed use is for my personal real estate office, which I'm really the only one that works out of the office. I do have other agents that work for me, but most real estate agents work from home or out of their cars. So I don't need a whole space for just myself, and that's why my proposed use is for it to be a community meeting space. My intention is for it to be used for parties, gatherings, corporate dinners, lunches, anything that can be used for the space, and I don't want anything more than 50 people because it's just me. I'm the one that owns it, manages it, I'll be the one cleaning it and everything else. And so I purchased the building, I started the process, but I had no guidance on what to do, and so I got a ticket for just working on the building, and then I got a ticket for needing a license. So I've been going through the process ever since then of having inspections and getting everything ready, and this is where I am now. When it comes to the parking, right along Susan Street, there is no house right there. There's about a good 30 feet of sidewalk, and so that allows for about 4 spaces without being directly in front of someone's house and without involving the residents. The parking lot fits 14, and it asks for a certain amount of spaces per person for gathering, as well as the office, but when it comes to the office space, it'll really just be myself working out of the office, unless we have a team meeting or something, but that's not gonna be going on at the same time as the meeting. There is an apartment upstairs, but I have not started renting that out yet. I did go through the process of having it approved, so it's ready, but that's not my intention to really rent that out yet, because first I'm trying to see what's gonna happen with the downstairs space primarily before I get into renting out and dealing with tenants and things like that. So I just wanted the space to be something that's gonna be a building to the community, and not just for parties, but I've also had talks with Chamber of Commerce, as well as other people within the city who may be able to use the space during daytime hours for tutoring, for all types of activities. So I just wanted to make the space available for whatever it could be used for, because I'm not going to just occupy the whole space just by myself selling real estate.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful. I'd like to welcome Mr. Sam Shepard. I have to keep this up, I know. I hate to keep this up because I always call him the wrong name. Sam Henley, our Vice Chair, thank you for joining us this evening. The office that you have in that space is on the first floor?
So everything is on the first floor. The second floor is just apartment.
Okay.
So I mean, I could use either one, but see, when I go in there myself. Right now, it's just tables and chairs. I'll go in there, sit at a table, work on my computer. Like I said, I sell real estate, so I can just go in there and work from anywhere in the building.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand. You haven't gotten into the rental upstairs. You're on the first floor, so you're one car when you're there. And for the total square footage, and I'm going to turn to staff on this, the total square footage of that building, if there's an apartment upstairs as well.
It's about 2,400 square feet total, but the downstairs unit is roughly about maybe 1,200 to 1,400. That's
Okay.
including the rental space. There's kitchen space. There's additional extra space as well.
Okay, so 1,400 square feet on the first floor. As I turn to staff, the parking allowance for the first floor usage would need to be not 19 for the first floor. Can you break this apart? Can we understand what parking needs to be delegated to what floor and the usage in that building?
So I can't break it up by floor, but by use.
Okay,
So the application that was submitted was for office space and event venue only,
okay,
not residential.
okay,
So the parking calculation is 1 per 3 people permitted at maximum occupancy.
okay,
So 50 people is permitted by the fire department, divided by 3, gets us to, I believe, 17 spaces.
okay.
And then 2 more spaces to allow for the office, which is 1 space per 300 square feet.
Okay, so that's not even getting into the apartment. That's not the residential upstairs. All right. My general sense of this is that we're trying to put a lot of stuff in a very small spot. Did you have any questions for our applicant, Sam? I know you didn't hear everything.
Yeah, I think I'll defer to my other commissioners on this one.
Okay.
Since I missed a lot of the context
Not
here.
a problem. I personally am just not feeling warm and fuzzy about what all is the attempt for this space. I appreciate that you're trying to bring opportunity to the community, but I think you're maybe trying to bite off more than what this space can really allow. So, Michael, did you have any? Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So based on the current requirements, it is enough space for what I'm trying to do. It says that it is because it's already a C1, and it is enough space in the building itself.
But the parking for what you're trying to do is at the 17 spots that you would need. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just going to be repeating. It's 17 spaces is required for the event space due to the maximum occupancy set by the fire department. 17 spaces for that, 2 for the office based on square footage.
Okay, and then still nothing for the apartment. So again, we're talking about what is there on your parcel that you have purchased, not what's going into the overflow or what you're asking to be approved as a permitted, off-the-site opportunity. It's a busy street. It's by a curb. There's a lot of activity there. We've already had a resident that came in and spoke about what's happening in the district meetings, that there's concern about trying to accommodate that site. So, Sue, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add some information regarding our district meetings. I do attend them, every one. And at, I believe, the district meetings in January, maybe February, there was multiple meetings with the Jack McIntyre, is he head of code enforcement?
Yes.
He was at those meetings. It was brought up by residents in the area regarding what was going on with it. I did look at your Facebook page. You stage beautiful events there, beautiful events. I saw the pictures from set up for baby showers, whatnot, as well as marketing for graduations in June. Some of the concerns raised by residents at the meeting were, everyone, I think, was under the same consensus. It looked great. Remarkable improvement to the building. But some of the concerns, which one of them is a big concern for me too, which hopefully staff can add to this, is there was concern regarding the structural integrity of the building, and that interior walls were removed. And in the event space, as beautiful as it is, there is only one post holding up the second floor in the middle. And Mr. McIntyre had alluded that there was supposed to be some sort of structural analysis to see if this was safe. And I'm wondering, before we delve into all of this and get into the nitty-gritty about it, if it's not safe, then why are we even discussing a parking waiver? We can't just take out walls.
So I did not take out any walls. The updates that I have done was just cosmetic. I have not done anything to do with walls or anything that requires a permit. From the previous owner, I was told that there was a car accident, a truck ran into the front of the building some 6-7 years ago. The whole front end of the building that we're talking about has been redone. It was paid for by insurance. I don't know anything about that, but my updates have all been cosmetic. I came in, repainted, flooring, light fixtures, things like that. I have not taken out any walls. And like I said, I'm not planning to rent the apartment right now, so there isn't any risk of anything in the ceiling, because that's really not my intention to be a landlord.
Right, I understand.
So really, let me give some context about this proposal coming forward. The use was in there. It is a permitted use in the district. However, it needs to meet zoning requirements. So he's going through, I believe, administrative site plan, is that correct? Process through staff. It's not approved until it meets all requirements. And so what is before you tonight is solely on the parking. Now, any redevelopment or development in the city has to go through planning and zoning first before building even touches it. So tonight, you are solely looking at parking. The building department will be looking at it through an occupancy and related application inspection process. No business will be open if it's not safe to do so. The applicant has the ability to talk to the building department if they feel that there is any structural, compromises to a building, but without, under a normal process, really, that should not be under consideration for Planning Commission tonight, but that would be reviewed with the building department. And this is, really getting the use approved is the first step in the process. It can start getting pricey when you start going through the building inspection process and start doing inspection fees. So that's why this is first, to see if this proposal for the land use, for the parking, the layout is sufficient for what's here. So.
Okay.
And if I can add, because I wasn't aware of the process, I did things backwards. So I already had 2 inspections by building inspector and Raphael, which I think is over the building department. So they've already inspected the building and said the building is fine. But then I found out afterwards that I have to go through this first.
Yeah, and I would say that there may have been inspections. You have not received approval from the building department to operate the business.
No approval,
absolutely.
because they told me I have to do this first now, so that's why I'm here.
So.
Okay. Sam, anything yet? All right.
I get addition.
You have more?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were done. Go ahead.
On your parking layout, I had a question. One of the things that I don't see, I see the existing outline of the building, and I see the new site plan where you have the 5-foot buffer, and you have a 20-foot parking spot plus 21 foot to the building, but that doesn't show the concrete steps that are in the rear that actually project out from the back of the building.
So the steps don't have anything to do with the parking. This was prepared by an engineer. He came to the site and he developed all of this. But there's a porch that comes off the back and there's like 1 step, but that doesn't have anything to do with the parking though.
It projects into the parking area. It doesn't project into the parking, but when someone backs up, projects into the range of motion of the vehicle, per se.
And the minimum driveway width is 20 feet. As you can see there, the list is 21 feet. That could potentially be a conflict.
Okay, and then you mentioned the 30 feet on Susan Street behind the new build.
No, it's on, not behind, behind that new house, yeah.
There is no parking behind that house. There's no parking on one side of the street and parking on the opposite side of the street. And what makes that area unique is the lot sizes. There's many houses on the lake right there, and they tend to taper, which in turn, you have multiple driveways. You have multiple driveways from on the opposite side of the street. So when I drove this over the weekend, you can tell that the south side of Susan is utilized by the residents. It's full.
Yeah,
So-
but there is parking allowed on the side that I'm on, and that's public parking right in front of the building.
On one side, yeah.
Right, that's why I'm just talking about on one side. So on one side, it's about 4 spaces.
Right here. And then you're going to lose some with the approach. And your neighbors utilize their driveway to its capacity. Plus, you already have people parking on Ruth. So basically, the only parking you're going to have available for overflow is the dead end where Ruth and Susan intersect. So there really isn't any overflow parking for you. And there is a significant grade difference between the adjacent parcel to your parking lot. You're going to need some sort of I don't know if you're going to need a retaining wall back here or what. You're going to end up losing some significant trees in there when you put these parking spots in. And I don't see an area for a dumpster.
I wouldn't need a dumpster because I don't use that much trash. I don't need I use a regular dumpster now. It was a regular dumpster there when I got there. That's what I use, just a regular dumpster.
Okay, so how do you plan to address the event space, the trash from the event space?
So I use the space for myself. I have my family, we come up there, we use the space, we put the bags in the trash can. That's it. I mean, because I haven't been able to use the space for public use, instead of having my family at my house, we go up there. And when we eat and have whatever we have, we put it in the trash can. It doesn't exceed one large trash can. You know, plates, cups, things like that. We're not talking about major trash. We're talking about plastic cups, paper plates, things of that nature. And as far as the retaining wall, as mentioned, there is a privacy fence right there already. If necessary, as the code says, I can put a wall there. That's not a problem. There's grass between the parking lot and the house behind it, so the wall would have to go along the grass. So I don't know whose property that is because the neighbor has said that that's her property where the fence is, but the wall will go on the grass, not in the lot.
Okay, those are my comments. Thank you.
You're welcome. Sam, anything? Well, please go ahead.
So first of all, I like what you're doing. I've got I'm a landlord, so I've got buildings that are venue spaces. My concern for you and your clients and your neighbors would be, where's your overflow? Like, because I don't think it's a problem getting you to 7. I mean, you got 5 street parking spaces, which we're not allowed to count, but you got 14 in here. But with that kind of a venue, you're probably going to have 25 to 30 cars would be my guess. So if I were in your shoes, I would, for your client, not just to satisfy what we're doing, but making sure that people aren't parking on your neighbors' yards, is maybe valet service. I don't know how that works with the city, but you're going to have some way to overflow the parking. Because if you're doing a good job and you're successful with this and you're getting 50 people, which is not an uncommon thing for a wedding or a shower or something like that. I have a building in Keogh Harbor. It's a small little venue space, but it fills the 30 spaces. So that would be my only concern. I mean, using it for what you're using it for is as your office and other stuff, this is perfect. But what happens when 50 cars show up or 30 cars show up, 25 cars show up? Where do they park? So, and they're going to park wherever they can, and that would be the concern. And that's the concern of your neighbors around the area. Is like, how do you address that? Can you use your neighbors? I don't know. I don't see any available parking nearby. So have you thought that through?
Yeah. So on the opposite side of the building, there is a grassed area that fits a few cars. On the side of the building, there's a completely vacant lot, which I've attempted to reach out to the owner of the other commercial building, because from my research, I think they own all of that, but I haven't been successful in getting in contact with them to try to buy a portion of that lot so that I can use that. Other than that, from my research, I just shown that there were some spots on the street next to the building, and there were some other spots, but we shouldn't need too many. I mean, essentially, yeah, you could say 25 cars, 2 people every guest. That still gives us maybe 6 cars in the neighborhood, and from my research, the neighborhood parking spots are public property. So I'm not trying to overcrowd the neighborhood with cars.
Sure.
And my events are going to be specific. So I'm not trying to have big events. That's why I requested 50 and under.
Are they mostly day events? I mean, are you gonna have a lot of night events?
So it's up for debate. I mean, I could, whatever comes available. I would prefer day events, of course, but that would be something that would be more specific to city or business or something like that. So I would assume on the weekend it would be more evening events.
Right, because I mean, if I was your neighbor, my fear is that now you've got a wedding going on or something with loud music going on till, I mean, I'm sure that we have a noise ordinance, probably 11 o'clock or something like that. But that would be the concern, I think, from neighbors. So that's all I have. So, but I mean, I like what you're doing. So not against it. It's just, how do you satisfy the parking needs? If you can get that neighbor's lot and figure out how to do that, then that solves a lot of that. So.
Okay, Sue, you had another question?
I just wanted to add that the feedback that we received at our district meetings was the issue with parking, and that's why it became flagged per residence, was because of the parking, that people were parking everywhere. Thank you.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
That was happening, or that was the fear?
No, that was happening.
That was happening. Okay,
That's
so
why
these are with events that
people,
have already happened.
yes, that's why people brought it to the attention of code enforcement.
All right, good, thank you.
Okay, then I think we probably need to have a motion here, right? No one else has anything they want to add? Nothing else for staff? Any questions for our staff? Nope, all right, I need a.
So I just want to say, like, you've got the motions in front of you.
Yes.
The applicant has the ability to, if they don't get successful tonight, there is an option of a variance. We could potentially work with the applicant and the building department to control what the occupancy of the building is. I don't know that that's necessarily their desire, but, there are several options based on the vote tonight, so. Okay.
And I think it's hand in hand. If there's less people in the building, there's going to be less cars that are at the property. So I appreciate that bit of information that was added, but for what we have in front of us, the size of the structure, not even taking into account the rental space, there's just not enough parking on this property, and even though there's parking on the street, I don't think that is fair to expect that that's always going to handle overflow, because there's a lot of houses close by. There's just, maybe this is one of those things that it's better to try and acquire the lot next door and, move from that point, but for this parcel and what the attempt is for the use, they don't fit together. So, a motion from someone, please? You can come up before we do our motion.
So, and I don't know if you guys would know this or if I would have to ask someone else, but right now the proposed use is 50 persons. If I were to change my proposed use to 40 persons, that would only mean 13 some odd spots. Is that something that I'm able to do, as he mentioned, with the different options?
Correct, but that's not something the planning commission necessarily their proposal is for 50 tonight.
Oh, yeah, I
That
just
is
wonder
for
if
the
that's
waiver,
something I'm
but
able to do.
I do want to warn you, that porch, which is not shown on your plot plan, is an important component, and so, there may need to be some additional work to that, but we can work with you after tonight's meeting.
Very good. All right, go ahead, Sue, with your motion. Were you going to make the motion?
I move to deny the requested parking reduction of 5 spaces at 239 Voorhees based on the,
You'll have to make up your own fact. We don't have standards.
Based on the fact that these cars don't fit.
based on the fact that there are inadequate overflow parking.
I turn to our legal review. That's okay? Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Any support for this motion?
Support.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Commissioner Shepard.
I guess the answer is yes to deny.
All right. Commissioner Sinclair.
Yes to deny.
Commissioner Henley.
Yes to deny.
Commissioner, are you voting?
I'll vote. So what's the motion before us?
To deny.
Deny the parking reduction. I will gotta make sure I vote the right. So denial is,
It's a yes.
Yes.
you vote yes if you want the denial.
Correct.
So I vote no to say no to the denial?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm a no.
Commissioner Parlov.
Yes to deny.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
I'm back to us.
And I just want to say thank you for, as a Pontiac resident, investing in a Pontiac location for your business. And thank you for all the improvements that you've made to it so far.
All right, so now we're on to our last application, SPR 24-030, James Pappas, preliminary site plan review for 25 South Sanford Street. It's the new build multifamily residential property.
All right, so today's site plan case is for 25 South Sanford. You last saw these people when they were applying for a rezoning. So this is case SPR 24030. It's a request for site plan approval by James Pappas to allow for a multifamily apartment building at 25 South Sanford. The applicant is proposing to demolish the existing Purdue school and replace it with a new structure. The proposed building has a floor area of 53,006 square feet. The building will front along South Sanford and Pike Streets. The site is a conforming property, and the proposed site plans comply with the ordinance standards pertaining to dimensions, such as setback and height. The property was recently rezoned from R1 one-family dwelling to R3 multiple family dwelling. These are the site plans. You can see the building is tucked at the corner between Sanford and Pike Street. Parking is in the rear. Units are located here. Detention here. Access drives, there are 2 here. Main access to the building is located over here. So there are a few zoning compliance deficiencies that will need to be addressed. First, there must be at least one building entrance on each street-facing facade per the requirements for common yard facades. Patio areas are prohibited between the building and a public street unless it is designed to appear as a porch. Bicycle parking appears to be provided, but it is unclear from the plans how many spaces are proposed. We just need to know that number. Striping requirements, what color will the parking lot be striped? The ordinance allows yellow or white striping. We just need to know what color. Shielding, there appears to be decorative uplighting proposed in the form of lumen facade logs, which are new to me. Decorative lighting is permitted at the Planning Commission's discretion, but you'll have to decide for yourselves whether or not you think it is appropriate for the location. These are the proposed facade renderings. This is what you'll see off Sanford Street. This right here is the area I was identifying that could potentially be considered a patio, so it'll need to be addressed. These are the side elevations off Pike Street. You can see that the building is broken up. It's architecturally interesting. Access is off the parking lot. Moving on, for a few more zoning compliance deficiencies, multiple family apartment buildings, an outdoor recreation area must be provided, and it must compose at least 5% of the site. There's a significant amount of open space on site. We just need to know what sort of recreation is being proposed for that location. And then lastly, minimum parking required. Based on the number of units and bedrooms, 73 parking spaces are required and 56 are provided. A waiver from the Planning Commission or a variance from the ZBA is necessary to address this deficiency. And then our review of the standards for approval. In regards to circulation, the site would appear to be sufficient for traffic and pedestrian circulation. There are 2 access drives and barrier-free spaces are placed closest to the entrance. The parking lot is arranged to minimize the distance people must walk to reach the building. Sidewalks are provided for pedestrian access. In regards to buildings, proposed building is appropriately placed so as to minimize impacts on neighboring properties. The parcel in question does not directly abut any other parcels as it takes up the entirety of the block. However, the proposed building is proportionate to what has been on the site in the past. For natural features, there are no existing natural features on site that rise to the level of needing preservation. In terms of site layout, no screening is required and the site appears to be appropriately arranged so as to not negatively impact nearby properties. And then lastly, compliance with the zoning ordinance. The compliance deficiencies outlined previously must be addressed prior to issuance of any preliminary approval. In summary, the structure and layout of the site appear to be suitable for the proposed use, and there are no major risks to the public health, safety, and welfare. However, there are some zoning compliance issues that need to be addressed pertaining to parking, lighting, and design. Furthermore, the Planning Commission will need to determine whether the proposed decorative lighting is appropriate and whether a reduced number of parking spaces is appropriate. And with that, staff's recommendation is approval with 7 conditions. One building entrance shall be provided on each street-facing facade or a variance secured from the ZBA. 2, the patio area shall be removed unless it is redesigned to appear as a porch per common yard frontage standards. 3, the applicant must designate outdoor recreation provided in the amount of at least 5% of the site before issuance of final site plan approval. 4, the Planning Commission waives the 73 parking space minimum to allow for no less than 56 parking spaces. 5, the plan shall be revised to indicate how many bicycle parking spaces are provided to meet the minimum requirements of the code. 6, the plan shall be revised to indicate what color the parking lot will be striped in. And 7, the decorative uplighting in the form of lumen facade logs is approved by the Planning Commission. And with that are the standard motions.
And thank you, Corey. I just wanted to reiterate on number 1. I know that there's a kind of a layout plan that's part of this building in terms of how where the customers would park, where the visitors would park, and how they would enter. But, you know, staff and the zoning code feels it's real important to get an entrance out to these streets, which is why that regulation exists. I don't think staff has in great length talked about it with the applicant, but if that is something we needed to discuss tonight, I think we'd be happy to. Okay, thank you.
All right, very good, thank you. Do you have any questions for staff, Michael?
If you can stay on what those conditions were. No, that's okay. I just want to make sure I understand. So our code says that there has to be multiple, each street-facing facade needs to have a building entrance based on the size, or?
Based on the fact that it is a common yard type facade. So there are different types of street front facades, such as front parking, rear parking. This is categorized as common yard, which is a typical residential design. The ordinance specifically requires 1 entrance on each street.
So, but what makes it a common yard? Because it,
The layout.
the layout makes it a common yard.
Yep.
I'm just trying to educate myself here, please bear with me. So it's common yard based on the layout, which I like. I think it looks great, but that triggers common yard. And so entrance, we mean like doorway. We don't mean like drive.
Right.
We mean
to the building.
Entrance to the building. Seems tricky. And the Planning Commission doesn't have the authority to override or supersede that, only the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Correct.
Because, I mean, I'm going off of, I am biased. I've got a 98-year-old grandmother still alive, thank God. And so she's in a senior apartment complex. For security reasons, there's one primary entrance. There's a fire exit and entrance where they can, after hours, you know, like have an additional access if the main door is no longer accessible. That probably wouldn't be applicable here. But they would have like a sort of, what's the word, court facade? Is that what it's called? Or
common yard.
Common yard facade. Their structure, and it's in Oakland County, but not in Pontiac, you know, they would have like a common yard. That's how the layout feels. It seems very industry current for senior apartment complexes, this common yard facility. It just, to me, seems confusing for a layperson if they are walking, trying to find how to get into the building. If there's an entrance that's not really an entrance, it's just kind of checking the box. Like, how much does the plan require it to be a full-fledged entrance versus an entrance? It looks like one, but it's always locked. You know what I mean?
It doesn't address that concern specifically. Okay. But I do want to add, just to correct something I said previously, Mark is going to grab the ordinance. We're going to check to see, the Planning Commission may have the ability to waive this requirement. We're going to double check for you.
Okay, that'd be helpful. Helpful to know for this and future, because we, you know, this might be a trend with common yard that we might find in other residential, not even just senior specific, but residential housing complexes to come. So that answers that. Okay, so now we're talking about the patio area shall be removed unless it is redesigned to appear as a porch per common yard frontage standards. What's the porch versus patio designation? I'm just not clear yet. I think the plan looks awesome. I love the way it looks. you know, at that, from South Sanford Street. It looks great. What's the difference in terms of design and use?
I can't speak to the difference in design. I can just state that the plan specifically referred to it as a patio, which is why I highlighted it.
Okay, so the phrase patio triggers some planning, you know, other implications. So what do our ordinances or requirements say about what can and cannot be a patio, and what does that mean? Because we're saying that there can't be a patio, right?
Yeah, so it doesn't dig into the specifics of what the difference is.
It just says there cannot be a patio.
It just says there cannot be a patio unless it looks like a porch.
Okay, so if on their plans they called it a porch, it would probably be okay.
Probably would not have triggered my concern.
Okay. So the area shall be removed unless it is redesigned to appear as a porch. Okay. So if there's a little tiny text underneath it that says patio, if that was changed to word porch, that might satisfy that. But our ordinances are the ordinances, so patio can't be called a patio. We'll ask the applicant later what's just sort of the functional use of that designed area. The third element is that outdoor recreation. So have they submitted anything that has any outdoor recreation component? Is it just a matter of the footprint?
They have not. They just need to establish that as part of this and kind of memorialize this as part of the application. We feel that this is minor and easily can be done at the final site plan.
Yeah, there's a lot of land with the site, so that's great. It's not like we're wedged in some tiny little thing. There's a lot of versatility there, which should make that easy.
If I may jump in real quick.
Yeah.
So the ordinance does provide the Planning Commission with the ability to waive any design standards. So the issue with the patio and the issue with the front, with the entrance facing a street, both of those are waivable by the Planning Commission.
Okay, but we would still want to do them as a condition, right? We would say we waive that,
Yes.
that. Okay, that's helpful. So we need to one way or the other address the entrances of each street-facing facade, and we have to address patio. Okay, so outdoor recreation, I think that's straightforward, and we'll welcome what the applicant's, you know, initial reflections are on that. Number 4, Planning Commission waives the 73 parking space minimum. So this revisits what we just were talking about. We've got a permutation based on how many units? That's what.
Parking requirement is based off bedrooms, 1.1 spaces per bedroom.
Okay, so based on the bedrooms, our standard requirement would be 73 spaces. I'll wait to hear from the applicant what's their vision, like how many units and how some of those permutations are. Again, using my own life experience, my 98-year-old grandmother in her apartment and able to independently living, thank God, she does not have a car. She has not for a number of years. So she has, even though there are 2 bedrooms in that unit that she is in, for example, there are 0 cars because she's at a certain age, advanced age, that she ain't driving. But there could be many residents, and this is sort of the question we have to ask ourselves with any residential space. Is there a lot of families or a lot of people where do they have 2 cars or more? That's sort of why we have our formula. But because this is senior apartments, senior living, and senior family units, there's a possibility that there are a number of, no matter how many bedrooms there are, a single occupant or a single prospective driver, regardless of their driving status or their age. So Pontiac has, I think the number is about 25% of our population does not have direct access to a vehicle. And that doesn't mean that it's only a certain age group that can run the gamut from 20s, 30s, doesn't have direct vehicle access, could be advanced age, our mature residents. I could see in the next 20 to 30 years to come, this site would be very viable with Pike in terms of the Clinton River Trail connector, and if there's, if all continues to go well, where it's even more harmonious and hospitable for those that don't, whether they wanted to or not, they have no need for a vehicle because of mobility, connection, just the way in which hopefully Pike Street continue to be developed. There is a food store immediately across the street. We can't control or determine if that's always the case. That's helping them with their score for getting, credits and decisions from the state. But the practical benefit is that it's literally across Pike Street where there is a source for food and groceries. So I am comfortable with not having to say there's got to be 73 parking spaces. 5th, the plan shall be revised to indicate how many bicycle parking. Okay, they can speak to that. Seems like a great opportunity to add more bicycle parking spaces with the Clinton River Trail connector right at their doorstep. 6, the plan shall be revised to indicate what color the parking lot will be striped in. Is that just our plans require it to state the color?
Yeah, we just need to know what color. It has to be either yellow or white. We need to know what it's going to be.
Okay, so if a property owner, in this instance, a new developer, if they wanted to get exotic and make it green or pink striped or purple striped, they cannot because our ordinance does not allow that?
Correct.
Okay, that's good to know. And then 7, the decorative uplighting in the form of lumen facade logs, a phrase I've never heard before in my life, is approved by the Planning Commission. So what they've submitted for decorative uplighting is what triggers that we need to specifically condition for that?
The fact that it's uplighting, so.
Okay,
Yep.
so it's adding light pollution, that's the concern?
And it appears to be decorative in nature.
Oh, as in not necessary? What do you mean by decorative?
So it's illuminating, the applicant can speak if I'm incorrect, but from looking at the plans, it appeared as though it was lighting the side of the building.
Oh, okay. Well, I love that. I don't think that would be problematic. I think that I tried to do that with my house and with poor effect, but like it's very, like the way in which formerly Clutch Cargo's is now Grace Gospel Fellowship Church, if we look out that window. The way in which they have uplit that bad boy really highlights the architectural features and the history of the building. I think that would be really dynamic and really impressive. So that does not concern me. Thank you for breaking that down. It's about that it's uplighting on the building, which might be extraneous or might be more decorative. I welcome that warmly. All right, I think that answers my questions of staff, except that final site plan. Does that require to come here, or is that something administrative?
Administrative, unless you make it a condition that it comes here.
Does it?
Trying to do administrative for all of them.
Trying to?
Trying to, yeah.
Yeah, I have no concerns because of the site. The question that I have for both staff and the applicant is the location of the retention pond or retention basin. Right now, it seems to be closer to Pike Street. Is there anything from the city's vantage point that's requiring it to be there versus more set back? You know, I'm trying to think, you know, it's all one parcel, it'll be all one owner. Is there a future phase that could happen where there'd be another sort of, you know, annex or expansion of the complex? Is the idea that have it up there so that way if we want to have the complex keep going or have some sort of auxiliary connection that allows it? I'll let the applicant speak to that in terms of whether that's even in the cards or even want to be a long-term option. I'm just curious because obviously Pike Street is more of the major thoroughfare than Chandler to the south.
And that might be the low elevation point, so that
Okay.
might be a logical place. But I think the future plans, the applicant can speak about that. But they are complying with their new stormwater ordinance that's been in place for about a year, so.
So the city has newer stormwater ordinances, which makes it more harmonious with the natural environment, but more importantly, so that if there's a surge of rainwater, et cetera, it handles it more on site. Is that the takeaway?
That is correct.
Awesome. So we haven't seen too much of that yet because it's newer. And we really haven't had a lot of major new construction in the last year, I can't think.
But we've had a lot of applicants come through that have had to comply with that since, I think that was adopted in June of 2023. We've had a lot of applicants that have had to comply with that, so.
Well,
You
I
just
feel-
don't see it at the planning commission level, yeah.
Well, I feel good that I voted for that then. But that's helpful to, and I'll welcome for the applicant to get more perspective. But I imagine this has involved a lot of staff work, so I just want to say thank you for that because this is of great benefit and need to our city and our East Side residents, and I'm excited to see it take this next step. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Michael. Tim, any questions?
Michael hit it all.
Oh, my goodness, okay. Now, how about our Sam, do you have anything?
I'll wait for the applicant presentation.
All right, Sue, any questions for staff?
Same, I'll wait for the applicant.
All right, I don't have any questions either, so applicant, please come to the podium, state your name and address for the record. And I think you need to turn the microphone on. The little person, there you go.
There we go. My name is Scott Kelly, Fusco Schaefer Pappas Architects of 550 East 9 Mile, Ferndale, Michigan.
Wonderful. Is there anything you would like to add to this very detailed presentation?
Yes, I think I can add to some of the staff recommendations. Yeah, if you could, that would be great. Trying to read them from here. Eyes are getting a little worse as I get older.
The first one's about the street-facing facade entrances.
Yes, the street-facing facade. We are looking at design concepts in the corner there that would allow us to add a entrance. If that is the recommendation, we do not have an issue with being able to create that entrance in that corner.
But based on your operations, was that the vision?
Not the vision, but we can make it, we can make it work in terms of how we can adjust some of the arrangement of the rooms. And to be quite honest, the room sizes may require us to have an additional exit entrance anyway. So we're not opposed to the conditions there with the entrance.
The next is the question about patio area.
We'll rename that to a porch.
What's the vision for how that space will be utilized?
The porch is it's the outdoor space for the residents.
And also for, excuse me, Vern Gustafson with the Pontiac Housing Commission. It also, a porch, obviously, if we are looking at doors, by adding a door on East Pike and South Sanford, you need to have some kind of a landing or a porch. So that's what that would be for.
The next one's outdoor recreation.
Yes. In this case, we just want to make sure that, to clarify in regards to the ordinance, it does state 5% of the site development area. So for what we include in regards to building and the parking and detention, roughly comes to 2.9 acres. So we'll take a minimum of 5%. That's roughly about 6,600 square feet. And we have yet to determine exactly what that includes and where it'll be located. If you look at the building plans, that's a key. So if you look at the building plan, at the south end of the building, there is an outdoor space. That's all it says. So that's the beginning of something that could be greater, and also, obviously, with the remaining area, you see an opportunity for other opportunities, recreating, casual, more maybe passive, active, a combination of both.
Does the concept intend to allow pets into the units? It's okay if it hasn't been determined yet.
I don't think that has been determined.
Other buildings, that pets are allowed. Would a pet area or like a dog run, does that count as outdoor recreation?
Absolutely.
And I suspected 24 Bloomfield, if it's something that was built over the last 5-10 years, I think that's a pet area and that's what it's designated for.
Understood. If we can go back to the conditions, I'm just helping be their eyes here. If someone wants to take this gig, they can have it. The next is about your responses to parking space minimums.
The parking space minimums, obviously the 73 is what we've required, but we do have 17 spaces land banked.
We actually have 21.
21 land banked.
We're proposing to construct a total of 77 spaces. What we'll construct is 56, and we have deferred or land banked 21 spaces, and we would need to seek your approval on that waiver. So if there is the condition that we see more activity in regards to the number of cars, we can start constructing it, knowing that if on the site plan it does show those dashed lines of those 21 spaces, they're adjacent to the existing parking area.
So just to clarify for the commission, my colleague's sake, so you're saying that you've got it built in there if the need arises once you're rocking and rolling. You, of course, don't want the headache of not enough spaces to have a fully occupied building.
Correct.
That you would be constructing these additional 21 or so spaces. So it would still require a waiver of parking spaces, at least on this front end.
Correct.
That doesn't satisfy that, but that's helpful for us to know. Fifth, bicycle parking spaces, any reflections?
4.
Is 4 sufficient?
Yeah, that'll work.
Okay, and it just needs to be, in your final site plan administrative review, it just needs to be reflected where that is, okay. 6, color the parking lot will be striped in.
White.
White, okay, that satisfies
We do prefer yellow, but white is acceptable.
Okay, duly noted. And then,
What shade of yellow?
How about both?
lumen facade logs. Help us understand.
Actually, if you want to get into a big debate, I don't have the electrical engineer with us, but they are, in talking with Scott, and also I'd like to introduce Lily Gonzalez, who's with Scenair Solution, who's been our champion to get us through this whole entire process here. The electrical plans have not been finalized, so we're not certain if we're looking at, I got the impression from the last conversation that we will not be doing any uplighting of the building. It would be, anything that would be additional lighting, but it'll be shielded and directed downward.
And I think the concern there is probably more for security
Yeah.
standpoints and doing more of a downlight versus an uplight
Yeah.
in those conditions. But I do appreciate the clutch cargoes reference.
But so, as a potential condition, you don't have any concerns about us saying that at least preemptively, should you opt to do it, approval is given? Okay. All right, Madam Chair, I'll turn it back over to you. I think I helped you see what the conditions are and see if the applicant has further insights.
Thank you, thank you. I appreciate your eyeballs on the wall there. Tim, do you have any questions?
I don't. Everything looks great to me.
All right, Sam.
Yeah, just want to say thank you for the very complete plan set with color elevations and renderings. It really makes it easy for us. Even still, I just have a couple questions. Are there currently any plans for the remainder of the parcel? It's a lot of open space, and I know 5% of that is going to go towards recreation. But as of now, is there anything else planned?
Yeah, please.
You need to come up so people can hear you. And please state your name and address.
Good evening, Lily Gonzalez, 1249 Griswold Street, apartment 412, Detroit. So we have had discussions because that question has been brought up in different conversations, but we as a team have not finalized what a phase 2 would look like, but we have had discussions that there's an opportunity for something to happen. Our main focus right now is to get us through this low-income housing tax credit application and make sure that this project gets underground and underway.
Somewhat related, for the operations of the building, what is the number of staff on any given day that you?
So I'd have to look at the final number, but I think we're somewhere between 3 and 5.
Oh, okay.
Typically for this size.
So I guess what's the main driver for requesting this parking waiver? If there's potentially a phase 2 and you already have the land bank spaces that you'll build if you need them, well, if you build a phase 2, you're already going to need more spaces. So what's I guess the logic here for requesting the waiver now?
Well, part of it, I think it's also with just not putting unnecessary parking spaces if it's not needed, if that could be used for landscaping or for some other use. We recognize, and as Vern spoke to, we have land banked the area where if it's needed, then we'll do it. But I think for the intended use of the building and what we have seen in other operations of similar buildings, typically the residents don't all have vehicles, and as well, like was mentioned, there's some improvements along East Pike Street. So if we could also help promote multimodal transportation, which we plan to do with addition of bike racks and so forth, yeah, I think it's a little bit of just don't add more parking spaces if it's not a necessity.
So you have other senior housing facilities.
We do.
And what's the average capacity it look like for your other facilities?
I don't have a specific number for you. I can say, though, that for the type of multifamily buildings that we have, low-income housing projects, there hasn't been, there's a lower count in terms of parking that is needed. I don't have a specific number,
That's okay.
though.
I was looking for a qualitative anyway.
Yeah.
This question's actually for staff. So let's say they get the parking waiver, they have the land bank spaces, and when they go into operation, they have their families visiting the residents every single day and the parking lot's at capacity. Is there anything actually holding them to build those land bank spaces if they need them, or is it just like, oh, well, we could if we want to down the road, but then you never will?
So my understanding is it's based on what they're actually proposing right now. We're not doing any future approvals, but I could be wrong.
And the land bank that I understood it, and I believe Mr. Gustafson was here when that ordinance was passed, is that correct? Is really, that land bank is more for future development, not necessarily for the existing development. So I don't believe that the city has additional tools for just this phase. But
Well,
if
I've got one additional thought on that. So
Yeah.
let's say you got, I hope that all of these seniors are visited by all their family members every day and, fully staffed in that capacity. With the practical impact that'll happen, because there isn't street parking that's allowed on Pike, it's going to be narrowed further, in the next year or two. I don't think that there's much street parking even allowed on Francis or Sanford or Chandler, maybe on one side of one of those streets. But what'll happen is that people will just start parking on the grass. I mean, they're going to go into the lot and they'll be like, oh, let's hop the curb. So, and then that would be a code violation. So code enforcement would be the heat and the heavy that says you got to have a different solution because if the demand is there, it's going to spill over somewhere. And this site is so large, unless they have it really barricaded, it probably would, the practical impact would be that against city municipal code, there'd be parking on the grass, which would then engender headaches for them of a different sort.
Okay, I'll accept that. Thanks, Mike. That's all. Oh, yes.
If I may interject, and I think Mike's making a very good point, but hopefully we're not parking on the grass and going through code issues, and Mike McIntyre is coming out to visit us. I think with regards to quality management, we will understand that there is a parking issue and will be at the forefront to say we're going to be building those 21 spaces. I think the other point is that you talked about detention. Yes, it is the low point of the site in that area. It does require, in regards to certain landscapes and seating, to kind of flourish in regards to that detention pond.
As in SEED seating or seating?
Seeding, SEEDING.
Okay.
And also, we just don't, to be honest, we're not too sure exactly where phase 2 is going to be located. So, there's hypothetical locations and moving forward. So, again, it provides a good location. It's adjacent to the other. People can access it right to the front, the main entrance there on the interior.
But a related follow-up, your vision for the detention pond is that it would be lands, or it would be natural, beautiful. It's not sort of just this functional wah-wah that's alongside.
No, it can't be, because there's different layers of seeding, SEEDING, that one is more on the upland of the slope, and then there's also in the lower areas and so forth.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Sam Sue.
This is nitpicking. I only see one trash enclosure on here, which seems a little minimal. Not that that's a big deal, but everything else looks great. My only other comment would be for your outdoor recreation, does that include like seating areas outside? I guess that's a question for staff.
In the past, I believe this board has approved a gazebo as a recreation area.
Okay, well, maybe that's something that you can finagle with your patio on the corner. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Porch. It's always been a
Oh,
porch.
porch, sorry.
Oh, all right. Well, thank you for this beautiful everything. Renderings, design, thoughtfulness, project, everything. If we give you the blessing tonight and everything's off to the races, how much time are we anticipating before your project is all done and people are moving in?
All right, So we submit for the award in October. We would be notified in December. It takes more or less a year to close, so that's 2026 when we get off the ground, 14 to 18 months. So we're looking at Q3, Q2 of 2027.
All right, I'll be old enough to live there. Oh, my God.
They don't take 40-year-olds.
Thank you, Michael. Well, I just say thank you, as we all are saying thank you for doing this and being so diligent about it, because it needs to be done. And thank you for bringing a beautiful project to our city, because we deserve it. And if you want to do more of them, we're happy to have more conversations with you.
Amen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we need a motion here?
I'm ready.
You want to do that one?
Because I'm going to make this motion, and then if you could go back to the conditions, because I might modify a few of them. I move to approve the requested site plan for a multifamily residential facility at 25 South Sanford based on the findings of fact identified in the staff report and with these 7 conditions outlined below. 1, building entrance shall be provided on each street-facing facade or a variance secured from the Zoning Board of Appeals. 2, the patio area shall be renamed per common yard frontage standards. 3, the applicant must designate outdoor recreation, and it must be provided in the amount of at least 5% of the site before issuance of the final site plan. 4, Planning Commission waives the 73 parking space minimum to allow for no less than 56 parking spaces. 5, the plan shall be revised to indicate how many bicycle parking spaces are provided to meet the minimum requirements of the code. 6, the plan shall be revised to indicate what color the parking lots will be striped in. And then 7, the decorative uplighting in the form of lumen facade logs is approved by the Planning Commission.
Support.
Commissioner Henley.
Yes to approve.
Commissioner Shepard.
Yes to approve.
Commissioner Sinclair.
Yes to approve?
Commissioner McGinnis.
Yes to approve.
Commissioner Parlov.
Yes to approve.
Motion passes.
Yay, congratulations. Now get going. That's a long time. All right, so our next item is going to be the training best practices for us as the planning commissioners regarding our deliberation.
So I will introduce this. This presentation will be given by our attorney, Morgan McAtammy. Over the last 6 to 12 months, often when something gets passed by this board, we're still reviewing final site plan or something might be coming back here. I wanted to mention that, as we're going through our conditions and our motions and we're working with the applicant, we're really running on the motion and the approved conditions that are there. I'm hearing a lot of suggestions from this commission about we'd like to see 4-sided renderings or we'd like to see this. And I think those are wonderful suggestions. But what we noticed is there's really a motion being made, and it's actually being voted on immediately. And there's really not an ability for a commission discussion about whether some of those suggestions are codified or not. And staff is really, unless it's in a condition, staff can sometimes try to work with an applicant and suggest, but we don't have any legal obligation to require them to do so. And so I really wanted Ms. McAtammy just to kind of address, because it may kind of frame how motions are made and how that you guys are wonderful at deliberating, going through a lot of that, but just in case there was any work when it comes to the motions, if in case we wanted to get into the fine details. Because I will say, I'm not saying every suggestion is a worthwhile suggestion that it needs to be passed. We're really just going with what's on the motion, but does Planning Commission need to work together is really a question we want to ask you guys, if anything needs added to these motions once that original motion is made. So, yeah, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to keep it pretty brief. But the main thing that we're going to focus on tonight is the fact that the actual action that happens by the Planning Commission, so what we are seeking to have happen, comes in the form of the motion. The motion that is stated then seconded, and then voted on by you as Planning Commission. Like Mark said, a lot of the times those motions, while throw at the beginning, then have deliberations come after, and that deliberation generates a lot of good discussion about what you guys might like to see, what conditions that you would like to approve, but then those are not wrapped into the actual motion. And as a result, we are having good discussions about what the Planning Commission feels they need to see in order to approve something when it comes back, but we don't have the teeth to force that enforcement. So unless something is actually in a motion, then we don't have any legal authority to enforce that and say, hey, the Planning Commission conditioned this approval on XYZ, or the Planning Commission explicitly stated that they're not going to approve this amended site plan or final site plan unless we see XYZ. So just making sure we're very careful about what is actually moved by this commission and then what is approved by this commission. The easiest way to think of it is, even though some of those discussion points might be enumerated in meeting minutes, the big things that have to be included in the meeting minutes are the motions, the seconds, and the votes. And that's because that's the action that you take. So, for example, I believe a couple of months ago, there was a site plan that came before the Planning Commission. And Sue, you had mentioned that in order to approve it, you would have liked to have seen renderings. That was pretty well accepted by the Planning Commission. I think everyone at the time agreed that that is something that everyone would like to see, but that wasn't incorporated into the motion that was then voted on. And while that applicant, I think, is doing a good job of working with the administration, if it were a different applicant, we wouldn't have the teeth in the administration to say, well, you're not going to get your approval unless you show us these things, because that's what the Planning Commission has already said. So just making sure that we're careful about those things is our best practice. You guys did a really good job of that tonight, I will say, without even having any direction. There were a couple of things earlier when you voted to amend the motion to accommodate the changes that you had made. That's great. That's exactly what you need to do. And then just now, Mike, when you went through and you looked at the conditions because there were some things that you wanted to change, putting that on the record and then having everyone vote on it, that's the best way to do it. And if anyone's ever confused about what the motion is, it's always best practice to reiterate that before voting. A lot of the times with you guys, you have the motion enumerated and then it's seconded after deliberations, so you don't necessarily need that repetition, but it might actually be beneficial to get a motion on the floor so that you can have further discussion and then informally poll everyone to see if you need to amend that motion so that you get a better idea of what everyone on the commission is looking to do. So that's another way to do it. You can bring a motion. Council does this pretty well. They bring a motion immediately, then conduct deliberations, and if they need to amend that motion, they do so. I'd be happy to help with any of these things. If you guys ever have questions about what might be best, what should be included, what shouldn't be included, just send it over to me. I'm happy to, I can write things out for you. We can probably figure out a way for me to put things up on the screen, lots of things. There's lots of ways to do it. I know sometimes when I give you long-winded motions, it's not super easy because no one, can remember a 2-minute motion that I just said to you. But as long as it's something that we can make sure is adequately repeated, the form of it is not as important as having it. So when I say the form of it, if, say, I give you guys a sample motion and you say, I move to incorporate the city attorney's motion into the record and I move to take action on that motion, that would be sufficient. But if you guys I move to approve the site plan, and then have numerous discussions about conditions for that site plan, but don't formally incorporate that into the motion, then those are not effective. So in some ways, the form, as long as it's clear, is not substantive. It doesn't matter as long as it's clear what you guys acted on. But if you don't include your discussions into that actual action, then that is a problem. So that is the one thing we should focus on, and the one thing that I think that, I mean, you guys have done a really good job, I will say. I'm proud of you all. But it is one thing that I think we could do better on. Does anyone have any questions about that or examples? Yeah.
I do have two questions, actually. So what I'm hearing you say is our motions should probably have more detail to them?
I think that that's safe to say, yeah. Especially if you guys want to include conditions like things that you would like to see back before the commission, or for an example, and this is something that we can discuss in further detail at a later date, but we can include conditions like having development agreements or something like that if you want to bind the applicant to something. And that's something that you could include as a condition that we could later present. It was an idea that I had earlier with regard to the parking for 25 South Sanford. If we had wanted to, it's not necessary. I think you guys resolved it without it. But you could have a condition of a development agreement that requires the applicant to install that parking if, say, there are 3 code enforcement tickets or something like that. Put clear conditions on it. And that's always an option and something that the Planning Commission would do well to take advantage of.
And really, if I could just reiterate, I think our motions that, the planning team puts together are sufficient in the conditions, but you have the ability to add conditions, and I think in terms of being more specific, that's really where that would be added. And I think Morgan is here to help out if it's appropriate with the standards. You can always ask, if there's a nexus, a legal nexus that would be sufficient with that as part of this deliberation process.
Okay, thank you for that follow-up too. So when you had mentioned to make the motion, to put it out like what City Council does, they start with their motion. Can the person who made the motion make the amendment, or are they the ones required to make the amendment, or can someone else make the amendment?
So that's a great question, and there are 2 ways to do this under Robert's Rules of Order. So if, say, Mike, you make a motion and Sue, you amend it. If Mike wants to amend his motion, he can then seek to amend. He can request an amendment, and if he and Sue both agree to amend their motion, then you could vote on the amended motion. Alternatively, someone else can move to amend the motion. That motion can be seconded, the motion to amend, then the entire board would have to vote on that motion to amend, like we've done a million times. Vote on that motion to amend, and then vote again on the original motion. So if the original mover and second agree to amend their motion, then the first motion is off the table and the amendment is on the table. The amended motion is on the table. If someone else votes to amend and that is seconded, then the entire board votes on the motion to amend and then votes on the amended motion.
Okay. The development agreement. So I've heard the term. There was the development agreement in regards to the apartment complex on Mark. So other than that, I've never, for all the times I've been up here, that has never been brought to this table. So explain that, and how do we have the authority to implement that?
So a development agreement is a contract that governs the development. most communities that I'm aware of require development agreements for every development that comes before Planning Commission. And that's part of the zoning ordinance, that these development agreements are required as a condition of approval. Our zoning ordinance does not have that. That being said, legally, you are allowed to condition your approval on a development agreement. The development agreement gives you a bit more, gives the city, I should say, not just the Planning Commission, the entire city, a bit more authority and enforcement ability than simply a site plan approval does. So the site plan approval binds the applicant to develop that parcel in accordance with the site plan. Go ahead, Mark. Okay, the development agreement incorporates that site plan into a contract and also contains additional terms that govern the relationship between the city and the developer. And if the developer were to breach that agreement, then the city would have the authority to bring an action in the circuit court against them for breach of contract. So it gives another layer of safety and efficiency for the city. Whereas if the developer violated the site plan as approved, then under the zoning ordinance, there are some enforcement capacities, but it's not, it'd be district court or code enforcement or revocation of the permit, things like that, that are sometimes taken a little bit less seriously than a breach of contract action in a circuit court.
So go ahead.
Do you mind if I ask my question first?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Regarding development agreements, what's Planning Commission's role with that? Can they have the authority, or is that really of City Council to approve those development agreements?
So Planning Commission would have to condition the approval of the site plan on the development agreement. The development agreement itself, so the actual contract, would then go before council for approval.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for that question. With that information, when someone is in front of us and they are bringing their request without conditions, and we're not allowed to make conditional suggestions, is this a different way of getting the conditions that we are hoping to obtain?
No. So development agreements are almost always, there are certain times when they're not entered into in conjunction with a site plan, but for the most part, they're entered into as a condition of site plan approval. Whereas what you're talking about is a rezoning. And your authority with a rezoning, a straight rezoning or a conditional rezoning that you would like to see more conditions on would be to recommend denial and then have that recommendation go to City Council. And then if the applicant wants to, they can choose to voluntarily offer conditions.
Okay, so the development agreement is more for site plan?
Yep, exactly
Okay,
right.
specifically.
Yeah, it governs the development as a whole. So we have done some development agreements. You mentioned the 94 Dwight development agreement. We did draft that in conjunction with the initial purchase of the property. And we do that sometimes, but for the most part, it's done at site plan because you want the contract to contain the site plan. So you want that to be part of the enforcement ability. So that's the reason that it's mostly done.
And if I could add, really property sales, the city is selling, that's where development agreements are playing in from that angle. And that's where 94 Dwight comes into effect because there is a property sale pending in that case. In terms of, what my history with site plans and development plans, it's really when public improvements are being made that really it's important to have development agreements. That's not to say that's a hard and fast rule. I don't know that's the most efficient use of time for every site plan coming through here to have a development agreement. It's really if there's a key crucial element to protect the city long term, that's the purpose of the development agreement.
Or if you have specific concerns that you would want to be enumerated in a development agreement that you want the contractual ability to enforce, like say this parking land bank situation with 25 South Sanford,
Okay.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Go ahead, Michael.
So we can, going forward as a commission, just do the motions earlier on, so that way you feel like we're on solid ground in terms of parliamentary procedure, et cetera. Is there vulnerability in being too subjective in the deliberation? Especially I'm thinking about if somebody is denied. Have you ever found legally where they're able to say, they denied me X, either site plan or special exception, and the commissioners said this? Has that come up before, where the deliberation can be weaponized against the city?
It can in certain circumstances. My advice would be twofold. One, when you are deliberating and you have concerns, try to relate them back to the conditions that you are allowed to consider for approval under the zoning ordinance. That's the easiest way to do it. Sorry, standards, yes. Second, make sure you are treating every applicant the same. So if you would, I don't know, say a place of assembly comes before you and you would deny that place of assembly because of its location. If another applicant comes in similarly situated in the center of a residential area and you would have denied that first one, then you should also deny the second one. If it's a similar situation, you should treat them similarly. That's the main goal, because you don't want to be arbitrary in your decisions. That's when you get reversed.
And then my final question or feedback, our minutes right now are kind of like summary minutes. In the past, they were transcript minutes. City council uses really like just the motions kind of minutes. What's the best practice from a planning commission vantage point in terms of, I don't want minutes to be weaponized against the city either? Where's the direction we're heading?
So this is it's a preference of the administration, of course. That being said, almost across the board, our office and also other municipal attorneys and boards such as MML and MTA recommend to limit minutes to action items only, so to reduce the amount of discussion unless it's specifically requested to be included by the commission itself.
Meaning by motion?
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
So, in your situation, because these meetings are being recorded in addition to having minutes, it's less important, in my opinion, for the minutes to include the discussions. So I'd have to double check your bylaws because I haven't looked at them in a while. I have to see what your bylaws say about it. But I don't believe your bylaws say that you have to include discussions, and we could adopt minutes like the city council does, where it's just motion, second, vote.
Staff is happily requesting a meeting with you tomorrow.
Absolutely, I will be there.
So staff doesn't have concerns about just the motions and the votes?
I think, I don't know about Corey. Part of it comes from our history of getting involved and trying to make key points. It's not like saying resident X said this and resident Y said this, but I think we're very open to consolidating the minutes down a little further. I mean, I think we want to make sure it's doing it the best we can and protect the city long term, because sometimes there is fact finding the planning commission has, and sometimes you want to state that as part of it, but I think we can consolidate that down a lot further.
Well, that's an even better reason too for you as a commission to make sure that you're making your motions as clear as possible, right? If we're concerned about what's going to go in those meeting minutes because we want to make sure what's important is in there, then that's a reason to make sure that the motions reflect that. But again, because unless your bylaws say different, and I have to double check that, I'll do it first thing in the morning, but I don't think they say anything about meeting minutes, then there's no reason to have superfluous discussion language in the meeting minutes. And
because obviously in tonight's, what we voted on tonight, it says X person from the public spoke, and this is kind of what they said. but it also even says some of the points we make. But that doesn't necessarily include all points. It's a summary, so there's no way you're going to get it right. So the transcript was this thick.
Right.
It was exact, but it's also, so it's probably been very helpful for some past you're going to see like, what was that decision in 2012? Okay, at least I have a lot more perspective, but what's binding is only what the motion and the vote was. It doesn't matter how much you said you got to keep that noise down or else. It doesn't, if it's not in that motion or in a development agreement that also has legal teeth.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. To Chair Parlop's point about development agreements not really coming to us, there have been a lot over the years, but really it just doesn't come to us.
Yep.
So that would be a brave new territory for us if it warrants it or when it warrants it in the future. But the M1 concourse, that mixed-use district, did that have a development agreement even from the start?
Yes, it had a development agreement, and it also had the rezone and the conditional rezoning agreement, yes.
Okay. And then do they do something with Racer Trust? We only have one remaining Racer Trust property, but is there also some agreement or a binding thing?
So yes, that's part of the deed restrictions on the Racer Trust properties,
Okay.
yes.
We have more than one, but only one major property, if that makes sense. There's smaller properties in the city.
Do you think that development agreement came to the Planning Commission at the time, or would have been only the emergency manager?
M1?
Yeah, that mixed use, because that had a development agreement too. The mixed
I
use
don't
district
believe
had to
it
be.
came before Planning Commission. I believe it was exclusively before.
I think it was emergency manager at that time.
I think you're right.
Part of it, even when the previous mayor was here, I think the emergency manager still had control of certain things.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
Okay.
And your authority wouldn't necessarily be to approve the development agreements. It would just be to condition the approval of the site plan on obtaining a development agreement, which just means that if we can't come to an agreement, the city council and the applicant, on a development agreement, then the site plan is no longer approved. So that's your role in the development agreements.
And for the item of business that just came before us, the Purdue Senior Apartments of the former Purdue School, that inherently will already have a development agreement because it's city property. We're selling that to them. So we're going to bake in there all these other safeguards. It was, I didn't need to offer that as a condition because I already knew that. But maybe that would have made sense when we're like, this only would make sense if it really is going to be senior apartments, right? Because we're predicating our parking minimums and layout and bicycle infrastructure and all that stuff based on the use.
Yep.
And a development agreement would probably be our only legal recourse. I don't think we would have been able to say it from a planning or zoning perspective. It had to be senior apartments, right?
Correct, you're right.
So a development agreement, if it was a private property, we would say, and contingent, condition number 8, contingent on a development agreement between the applicant and the city of Pontiac that, could we be as specific to say and codify that it remained, limited to a senior apartment use?
Absolutely. In worst case scenario, what happens with that is that it'll come back before you if we can't come to an agreement on the development agreement. So all you're doing by condition, or the main thing that you're doing by conditioning approval on obtaining a development agreement is making sure that those concerns that you have are further considered and negotiated between the city and the applicant.
Going back to the minutes, do commissioners have any strong preference? Right now, it's kind of like synopsis. So it seems, is it too cost prohibitive to have transcripts? It's just too much?
It's a lot for us to do the minutes currently, and I think to consolidate, we'd be very interested in that. And do the transcripts, it is a costly thing, and it was something that was asked of the planning division with our additional staff to start taking that on. We've been doing that for approximately 13 or 14 months now, just because the transcripts are a little too much time, money, and frankly, it's too much detail within the minutes itself. And yes, there's been a couple cases. We have an appeal coming to City Council that we're going to reference the transcript from 2015. But I mean, the cost to actually get that, I'm not sure that there's a real benefit of that overall. And it's unusual for, with the exception of a ZBA, it's really unusual for a planning commission to go into in-depth minutes. I mean, it's really not required. And
Is the ZBA still doing transcripts?
they are not doing transcripts. And we are doing, we've had discussions about that, but with the Kelly firm, but we're still doing minutes, honestly, just to be more efficient with government money.
Mark, do you know what the video storage situation is for these hearings or these meetings?
I don't offhand, but it's a minimum of a year. I know it's probably longer than that, but I know we have it for at least a year. Yeah.
And then it's also simulcast, if that's even the right technological word, also on Facebook. So
Yes.
I don't think there's a sort of expiration on that. Someone could probably go, as long as there was no technical difficulties, if the city's page remains constant, you can go back as many years.
We were
as it started.
broadcasting.
Yeah.
I'll look into that because just having the video alone is a good reason to minimize the minutes. It's redundant.
The meetings are on YouTube as well.
That's good to know. I'll look into YouTube's requirements for storage.
I have a question about putting a motion out there before we even have any conversations. Part of me thinks that to do something like that, when we haven't even had a chance to really get into the meat of our conversations with each other, that it may kind of color where the conversations go. So I really don't see a benefit of doing that right away. If we can always make an adjustment anyway, what's the benefit of putting a motion out to start?
I think you make a darn good point, because if somebody says, I move to approve that, or recommend approval, we're all sort of reflecting, well, I don't approve, or, it all kind of colors that.
Could I offer a suggestion? Really, after the applicants speak, after a public hearing, every member is really saying their piece. But really, at the conclusion of that, that's when the motion should be made by somebody, and then that's when you guys start deliberating and working through those conditions itself. So it's maybe not immediately, but you are correct. I mean, you don't know if it's going to be approval with conditions, denial, but someone on this commission should have a pulse based on those initial questions and deliberations, after that.
Because part of what the benefit of having the motion in the second before we deliberate at city council is that why go through all of that time if it can't even justify getting a second, like if it's not viable. You only want to be debating motions that have some viability, because that's a downfall of like never-ending meandering meetings if you're always talking and debating and not putting a motion before you.
Yeah, it's a standard practice under Robert's Rules of Order. That being said, you do have the opportunity to have informal discussions before you put a motion on the table. So the way you guys do it now, especially with public hearings, is that you have administration speak, you ask questions to administration. You have the applicant speak, you ask questions to the applicant. You have public hearing, then you address that. You can have those informal discussions and get an idea of where everyone feels, and then put a motion on the table, then really deliberate it. So it's somewhere in between, whereas now you guys don't put a motion on the table until you've exhausted all discussion at all whatsoever. So just a little bit sooner. You're not obligated to immediately call the topic and then put a motion on the table like they do at city council. It's a little bit in between because it is a different subject matter.
Because if you say, everyone says, let's say we're really deliberating, we had all the public hearing, and let's say the way we usually do it, we're going through item by item, sometimes we feel obligated like, oh, well, we have to satisfy everyone's criticism or everyone's point of view with our motion, which sometimes they might be diametrically opposed. You can't tie yourself in knots to get the motion that makes everyone happy.
Right.
That at some point that you've got to have a motion about what do you want? What do you want? And so there might just be a little bit more frequently where, because something could be, let's say it was, I vote to allow a waiver of parking. It's moved and it's seconded. It could fail Do you then need to say, like, I move to deny? I mean, we don't really do that at the planning commission, but maybe other public bodies do. Like, there could still be a competing or different motion that then is offered.
Yeah, that's the problem when if you move to approve and it doesn't get passed, then it's not approved, right? So they either have to bring it back at the next meeting. You could move to consider denial or to reconsider. You can do different things. There's a million different motions that you can make if you didn't want to immediately just cast it to the following meeting, and I can help you out with that. But if you say you guys know that you're going to want to deny it, if you move to deny it, once it's denied, right? Mm-hmm. So moving to approve and then reconsidering after that gives you more wiggle room.
So basically, we should just throw it out there that I approve. Like, what about the thing we just looked at with 7 conditions?
I don't think you should just throw it out there that you approve. I think that you should have discussions beforehand. It's somewhere in between, right? After you've satisfied the questions to the administration, the questions to the applicant, the public hearing, and then the informal discussion, then you should move to do X, Y, Z.
And part of that's the optics for the public and for the applicant to know that you guys are considering all information before, you don't have your decision made up before you come here. And, it helps with the public trust of the process.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Is it different than what we're doing now? I mean, are you asking us, are you saying keep doing what you're doing, or, because I think the confusion is, do we throw a motion out early because we haven't been doing that? But that's not really what you're telling us, right?
No, so what I'm saying is you guys are doing, for the most part, a good job. I would say you can still have deliberation after the motion is put on the table. That's the one change that I would say you have to make. You don't have to. If you all feel you're ready to go, you do not have to have further deliberation. But the motion isn't the end unless you want it to be, unless everybody is ready to vote. The motion gives you the ability to have further deliberation and debate about the smaller things that you're concerned about. The real thing I would ask you guys to change or improve upon is making sure the motions are clear. You do a good job of making sure the motions are clear, but if you want to add additional conditions, make sure those are in the motions. That's the most important thing that I wanted to get across to you guys tonight. The rest of it, I think you guys are doing a good job. I don't want everyone to feel like once a motion is put on the table, that is the end of discussion. And sometimes it feels that way.
Okay. Well, that's fair. So what do we need to do to be great?
I would say if you guys want to add a condition for something, make sure it's in the motion. That's the only thing that I want you guys to take from this.
And frankly, in my past experience, Mona, once a second is made on a motion, ask the planning commission as a whole. You don't have to go down the list. Just ask, is there any discussion on the motion? And really, there'll either will be discussion or there won't be discussion. And then once you feel that discussion is had or finished, then you can ask for a roll call or a straight vote.
Okay, so role play. Mike says, I make a motion. Tim says, I second, and that's when we can go ahead and debate. Is that what you just said?
Yep.
Okay.
And you would open it up to the commission. You would say, is there any discussion?
Yep.
Gotcha.
Yep. Rather than immediately motion, second, vote.
Okay.
That's the only difference.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any other questions?
Free legal advice, ask now.
All right, thank you guys. I
Thank
appreciate it.
you. All right. Then we are now at staff communications.
I'm going to try to be quick hitters and be on top of this I know it's the end of the night. Master plan, the next meeting is a huge meeting. It is a town hall at the high school auditorium on Thursday, September 19th from 6 to 8 p.m. I encourage showing up at 5:30. It's starting at 6. So this is not an open house. You can just please show up at 6 o'clock. We are looking for as many people as possible and to really get the buy-in, and there's a lot buy-in from the community, feedback from the community. And this is a town hall, so we're actually going to be using a website as part of this presentation, and it's going to be a very interactive presentation. There will also be opportunities for the community to speak and give their feedback to the city and its consultants at this meeting. So Thursday, September 19th, from 6 to 8, but I'd encourage people to start showing up at 5:30. At the high school auditorium at 1091 Arlene Avenue, right off of Perry Street. Encourage everyone to come, and they've got large attendance. I would share from the master plan process right now, we've had actually very strong feedback on our survey. If you haven't done the survey, please go to visionpontiac.com, fill out the survey. It takes about 10 to 20 minutes. We've had a lot of responses. We are working hard to get people to come out to these community meetings. We have 6 of them. We've had 1 so far and 5 remaining. This town hall on the 19th is the second one. And these meetings will be occurring now until the end of November. And then starting in December, that's when it really will be coming to Planning Commission, City Council for the draft plan, and then for the final plan. A few City Council updates. I'm not sure if this was shared previously, but City Council voted to uphold the appeal and uphold Planning Commission's decision on the denial of the special exception at 382 Franklin. And so that really is not moving forward at this time. Additionally, an appeal was filed for 225 Columbia, for the concrete crusher. So on next Tuesday's meeting, City Council will set a public hearing. That will be held on October 15th. And that's a schedule. The reason why that's so far out is a scheduling thing between the City Council agenda and the appellant's schedule. But that will be to review the special exception for that concrete crusher at 225 Columbia. Additionally,
can I quickly ask, would that be notified to the neighbors?
Absolutely. Once we get the public hearing notice, we will start that process to get it in the Oakland Press and to notify the neighbors.
By ordinance, is that?
By ordinance.
It's just so rare that we've had these appeals come to City Council, but now we've had 2. I just was curious.
Yep. The rezoning for 94 Dwight, actually the 2 rezonings are moving forward to City Council. I believe that's going to be scheduled first reading next Tuesday on the 10th, and then hopefully the subsequent meeting on the 17th will be the second reading. And I did want to share, I know in a previous meeting we had, City Planning Commission had recommended approval for transparency. We are working with our attorney to provide City Council a separate municipal ordinance for transparency that helps with existing facades. So that will be going to City Council. We don't have a date scheduled, but we anticipate in the next 4 to 6 weeks that'll be going for first reading. So. Unless there's any questions, that is my staff report. We have a meeting on Wednesday, October 2nd. I can't believe we're talking October already. We are looking at about 5 or 6 items. We do have some informational sessions. I think these will be some new refreshing topics, but we're finalizing that agenda. It doesn't look overwhelming, but it does still look like a full agenda. So anything else? No? Okay, thank you.
Nobody has anything? Go ahead, Michael.
Just to clarify, so you're anticipating that the regular meeting schedule will be sufficient, at least as it?
Absolutely,
Okay,
yeah.
so you're not looking to add another one?
And frankly, between now and probably the end of the year, we're probably not going to schedule a second planning commission meeting because we have 2, from staff's capacity with the master plan stuff, there's just not enough time to be able to process, what's going through. So something could be bumped to the next month's meeting.
Has anything new been received on the shores of Crystal Lake, that development along Crystal Lake?
So
that had an informational session with us many moons ago?
Yeah.
Like 2 years ago.
So
a long time.
We formally received an application about 2 months ago. However, in review of the application, it was lacking the necessary requirements. So we had a meeting with the applicant about a month ago. They need to resubmit. That has not gone through even an internal review. We will be coming for an informational session. And when I say informational session, we've got a full plan in place. We are getting Planning Commission feedback for it to come back a month or 2 later for actual approval. So Staff is very committed to work with the applicant to make sure we're following our ordinance, running an efficient timeline, and moving this forward. There are some things with the development agreement that are still working out, and also with the submittal requirements that, to make sure that they meet the zoning ordinance before that moves forward, so.
Are these the same people?
Generally, it is the same group, yep, correct.
Okay.
So,
It was long enough ago that Mayor Waterman was sitting here talking about it with us, so it's been a little
Yeah.
while.
Yep. And we've been waiting on the applicant to proceed, and we look forward to that resubmission, and we're excited to bring this forward because it does bring a great opportunity. There's a lot of details that are involved in this project, but we want to see that it's a benefit to the community overall.
Great. Yes.
It won't come to Planning Commission, but it's in our general wheelhouse. So the McCarroll School, now owned by the city of Pontiac, that demolition is now underway. Abatement's kind of wrapped up, so that structure will be demolished. The city council did approve the design for a youth recreation center that will be on that location. Not city property, but working in tandem with demolition of McCarroll. It's a partnership with Oakland County, is the Emerson School. So that Emerson School is actively, demolition is being pursued, and over the next number of months, that will be demolished as well on Emerson.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else?
Question. To Mark, was because 94 Dwight is going before the city council, was the parking requirement revised?
Can you clarify that question?
I sent an email approximately a month ago regarding the parking requirement. I wondered if it was revised.
The parking requirements, okay, so I think I understand the question. The applicant has not amended their application for the number of units that are there. That is really up to the applicant. But with that said, there are two ordinances that are going forward to city council. One is the regular rezoning. The other one is the one on Mark Street, which is a conditional rezoning that if it doesn't get developed, if it's approved and doesn't get developed, it would revert back. As part of this process, the applicant is responsible for proposing how many units and how many parking spaces and receiving a waiver from Planning Commission in a future site plan and potentially a waiver from the adjacent buffer yard requirements. But that's really not as part of a rezoning request. That's not up for discussion right now. And so, really it's up to the applicant to propose how many units would be in that existing building.
The only reason why I ask is I would hope that the decisions that I make, that I vote on, that the same information is provided to the city council. That's all.
So, nothing else? All good? All right. May I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
There were a lot of quotable things tonight. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Quotable